And Daubney show on GBNews. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, does misery upon misery await the nation? Well, Sir Keir Starmer braces the public for hard times ahead as he lays the foundations for a brutal budget. He says he'll clean up the country like he cleaned up the riots, but are you convinced? And next up, it was carnage at the Notting Hill Carnival. Police arrest 3 people in relation to the stabbing of a 32-year-old woman at the carnival, with over 330 arrests in total for offences, including sexual assault and attacks on police officers. Yet, it was mostly peaceful. And Paul Durrant, the 78-year-old Blackpool granddad, is now 24 days into his hunger strike over Broken Britain. You may recall I had him in this studio last week. Well, today, Paul will exclusively tell GB News once again how he has endured 2 sickening, unprovoked attacks in recent days by guess who? Pro-Palestine protesters, giving aggro to a pensioner who's a patriot. I'll speak to that intrepid pensioner later on the show. And Greater Manchester Police has announced it will not take part in next year's Gay Pride March. I'll be joined by a campaigner who claims that this is a long overdue victory for common sense policing. And that's all coming up between now and 6 o'clock. Once the show, always a delight to have your company. What a topsy-turvy world we live in. Things only get better, we were told before the election. Now, brace yourselves. Hard times ahead. Difficult choices. Lots of pain. Tax rises. Would you have voted for that? And mostly peaceful, wasn't it? The Notting Hill riot. There was a huge clampdown on the riots post-Southport. Anybody was sent to jail for seemingly anything. Facebook posts. But yet we saw the huge outpouring of carnage at Notting Hill. And it seems there's no comment from the Prime Minister today, no comment from Sadiq Khan. Are we living in a parallel universe of two-tiered Britain? Send your views and post your comments by going to gbnews.com/you'll say. Cracking show ahead. But now it's Tatiana Sanchez with your headlines.
Martin, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories. The Prime Minister has warned the October budget will be painful, but he says the country will have to accept short-term pain for long-term good. During his speech in Downing Street this morning, Sir Keir Starmer warned things will get worse in the UK before they get better. And next week's return to Parliament, he says, will not be business as usual. He also addressed the recent riots, saying they showed the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure. The Prime Minister also reiterated economic growth is the government's top priority.
In 7 years, I promised that we would get a grip on the problems that we face and that we would be judged by our actions, not by our words. I said before the election, and I say it again really clearly today, growth, and frankly by that I do mean wealth creation, is the #1 priority of this Labour government.
This comes as the Prime Minister faces pressure over accusations of cronyism as Conservatives demand an investigation into recent civil service appointments. Speaking earlier on GB News, Shadow Science and Technology Secretary Andrew Griffiths suggested it was hypocritical for Labour to talk about trust in politics.
In particular, he promised to introduce new levels of transparency and integrity, and yet what we've seen week by week over the last few weeks over the summer is revelations about Labour appointments to the civil service, the independent civil service. These aren't just the normal special advisors that all governments make political appointments to. These are some of the top roles in the independent civil service that Labour's been giving to donors and its political supporters. So it's pretty rich to talk about trust in politics at the same time as that.
International news now. Israel's military says it's rescued a hostage who was kidnapped by the Hamas terror group on October 7th. The IDF says 52-year-old Qaid Farhan al-Qadi is in a stable condition and is being transferred for medical checks at a hospital following a complex operation in southern Gaza. The hostage's family's forum said in a statement his return home is nothing short of miraculous. It said he endured 326 days in captivity. Back home, a man has been charged with murder after officers stopped him at Notting Hill Carnival. Detectives had previously issued an appeal to locate Kamar Williams, who was wanted in connection with the fatal stabbing of a 53-year-old in Stoke Newington. He'll appear in court tomorrow. And that's as 3 men have been arrested over the stabbing of a 32-year-old mother at the carnival, which left her in a critical condition. The woman was attending the family day on Sunday with her young child when she was attacked. The Metropolitan Police says it appears she became caught up in the middle of an altercation between 2 groups of men, but it's unclear if they were known to her. In total, just over 330 arrests were made over the carnival weekend for a range of offences, including violence, sexual assaults and attacks on police officers. President Zelensky says Ukraine has successfully run a test of its first ballistic missile. It comes after Russia's launched around 200 drone and missile attacks at Ukraine overnight. At least 5 people have been killed and dozens injured due to those strikes, which are believed to be a response to Ukraine's incursion in Russia's Kursk region. Meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky said it was vile and claimed the attack had targeted civilian infrastructure. In the UK from today, the NHS 111 helpline will now offer mental health support to adults and children in crisis. Local health systems previously had their own separate phone lines, which took about 200,000 calls per month. It makes the NHS in England one of the first countries to offer such a support service for mental health issues, as well as physical ones. Mark Zuckerberg has admitted Facebook and Instagram were wrong to censor posts about COVID during the pandemic, and he was wrong to bow to pressure, he says. In a letter to a US committee investigating online content moderation, Mr. Zuckerberg said senior White House officials repeatedly pressured the company after Joe Biden was inaugurated in 2021. He said that Facebook made some choices that it would not have made today. And after lots of speculation, British pop band Oasis are officially reuniting nearly 15 years after they split. Liam and Noel Gallagher are getting back together for Oasis's long-awaited reunion with a worldwide tour next year. Oasis, who released their chart-topping album Definitely Maybe around 3 decades ago, announced the series of dates kicking off their tour in Cardiff. Local people in Manchester are excited about the news.
Yeah, very excited. It's going to be interesting to see how long it lasts for, though, because you never know with those.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I'm going to try for tickets on Saturday.
Excited about it, but probably won't get tickets.
I'm going to get my mum and dad to try and get on it for me as well, like, but yeah. I'm buzzing, I'm a massive Oasis fan. I've seen Liam Gallagher a few times, but together, man, it'll be sick, yeah.
And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. Now, the Prime Minister has warned us all that the October budget is going to be quite painful. Full of optimism, as always, Sir Keir Starmer also said that things are worse than they ever imagined because of the economic black hole left by the Tory government. But don't worry, apparently the pain will be in the short term and worth it in the long run, honest Governor. Let's hear what Sir Keir had to say earlier on.
Those with the broadest shoulders should bear the heavier burden. And that's why we're cracking down on non-doms. Those who made the mess should have to do their bit to clean it up. And that's why we're strengthening the powers of the water regulator and backing tough fines on the water companies that have let sewage flood our rivers, lakes and seas. But just as when I responded to the riots, I'll have to turn to the country and make big asks of you as well, to accept short-term pain for long-term good, the difficult trade-off for the genuine solution. And I know that after all that you have been through, that is a really big ask and really difficult to hear. That is not the position we should be in. It's not the position I want to be in. But we have to end the politics of the easy answer that solves nothing.
Well, are you finding that very reassuring? Well, joining now to discuss it is our political correspondent, Catherine Forser. Excellent to have you back after a well-deserved break, a well-deserved month off. It was staccato, I felt. It was sober. It felt like he had a lot of weight on his shoulders. The lexicon of painful, big asks, long-term pain. A lot of people, Catherine, may have felt they were voting for change in a positive sense, a Blair sense, a things going to get better sense. The change, it seems, we've invited in, sounds like a world of pain.
It does, and Labour, as in 97, came in with a huge majority, but I don't think there is, or was, with the people that voted for this Labour government, in any way the same optimism that there was under Blair. There was a real feeling, as you say, things could only get better, a positivity and optimism. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is very sensible, very serious, works very hard, and has sold them on bringing change. But I mean, anybody that voted for change thinking that things were going to change anytime soon is going to be very, very disappointed. And I think what's very clear now from the tone of that is they are laying the groundwork for the budget at the end of October, which he said himself is going to be painful. And really, the picture he painted in that speech to me was of a broken Britain now. He's saying, of course, it's all the Conservatives' fault, just as, the coalition government back in 2010 came in. Labour helped them, didn't they, with that note saying there's no money left. But again, they made tough decisions, austerity, etc., and they blamed it for years and years on the Labour Party. And now we're seeing the same situation, only that, the parties have reversed. And I think all the hard choices that are clearly coming are going to be put back at the Conservatives' door over and over again, with some justification. But, of course, it wasn't the Conservatives' fault that COVID happened on their watch. It wasn't the Conservatives' fault that we had Russia invading Ukraine. But I think it was quite canny to put it in the Rose Garden, the scene of the crime, if you like, as he wanted to remind people Dominic Cummings' non-apology after breaking lockdown rules, the scene of the parties, the broken swing, etc., etc. But it was quite gloomy, wasn't it? And it does beg the question, what taxes are going to go up?
I've had a cup of tea in that garden. John Major's wife poured it for me in the 97 election. We were invited in that time where the Conservatives were desperately trying to save their government. It failed. But the optimism, Oasis are coming back. The energy of 1997 was so different to now. And it struck me as well that Sir Keir Starmer talks about the riots. And he mentioned how, he said, the riots had exposed a deeply unhealthy society. A lot of us, Catherine, were hoping, expecting, praying for a conversation about potential causes of those riots, the social discord. Why did they happen? In the same way we saw in the aftermath of 2011 in Tottenham. That didn't happen today. In fact, once again, he was talking about this being fuelled by populism, doubling down on this notion that the Conservatives and the right wing fuelled this uprising. So if anybody was looking for any kind of soothing of the brow on that front, that didn't happen either today.
No, it didn't. And I went to the lobby briefing for journalists with the Prime Minister's spokesman after that, and I asked what work the government was doing to address the underlying issues. Right. Of course, there's no excuse for setting fire to an asylum hotel. Of course, that's terrible. Of course, violence is not justifiable. But nevertheless, large numbers of people in this country feel that they have simply been abandoned, that nobody cares about them, is listening to them, that they haven't got the opportunities. I mean, that, to be honest, is largely why Boris Johnson managed to get that big 80-seat majority, because he said, look, I get it, I'm going to level up, etc. And I think a lot of those people who lent their vote to Boris Johnson, many of them then were fed up with the Conservatives. But it doesn't feel at the moment like Labour have the answer for those people either. And the Prime Minister's spokesman simply said to me, we're going to get growth, we're going to get opportunity. Well, growth is going to take time. If it was easy, it would already have been done. Opportunity, all of these things, if any of this stuff was easy, would have already been done. So I think, I didn't get a sense of, beyond them acting swiftly to lock people up, them really looking in a soul-searching way about some of the underlying causes.
Catherine Forza, excellent. It's great to have you back. Thank you very much. Now, joining us now is the former advisor to David Cameron, Philip Blond. Philip, welcome to the show. So, things are going to be painful. Things aren't going to get better. They're going to get much, much worse. Conservatives had 14 years at the helm, and a lot of Conservatives, no doubt yourself included, must be looking at Sir Keir Starmer in that rose garden now thinking, wow, there's going to be a long 5 years ahead.
Well, it was I agree with that analysis. I think that the Conservatives failed to transform the economy. And I think your correspondent, as she was speaking earlier, was quite right. What is most missing is a long-term analysis of where the problems are, the economic problems of the country come from and what they are. We are now lagging behind in terms of wages and remuneration for ordinary people, behind all of our peers. We're becoming the poor man of Europe again. And that's largely because we financialized the economy and our productivity started to drop before the financial crisis. And after the financial crisis, it hasn't recovered. We've flatlined. And there's nothing what I worry about for Labour. I think their analysis that it's bleak is right. I think the Conservative Party didn't so much leave a black hole as make assumptions that departments would be able to cut, which everybody talked about at the time, which they can't. But what I think is most kind of stark is it doesn't look as if any of the plans that Labour has in place are sufficient to meet the task that Labour itself has acknowledged. It doesn't look to me like there's a really competent growth plan waiting in the wings that we probably are happy to pay a price for. So my sense is things will only get worse.
Philip, you've been a former advisor to a Prime Minister. When you hear things in that rose garden, that historic scene, like things are going to be painful, we've got no other choice, there are big asks, short-term pain for long-term gain, big asks, those with the broadest shoulders will have to carry the weight. What does that mean? We're being feathered up here for brutal tax rises. What do you think that will entail?
I think it will entail a whole range of tax rises outside of the commitment not to raise tax on ordinary people. So it won't raise tax on income tax, VAT, and all the standard national insurance. So it means all the additionals like inheritance tax, wealth tax, capital gains tax will be taxed. They may well bring in pensions within the inheritance tax regime or indeed the capital tax regime. So I think you're going to have all sorts of increases in untaxed activity or asset holding to make it all stitched together. But the problem is, and I repeat it again, is the Conservatives didn't have a solution to our productivity crisis on our economic flatlining. And Labour don't appear to have a solution either. That's why I think it's genuinely bleak. We are all human beings are prepared to pay a short-term price if there's a long-term gain. But what worries me is there a long-term gain? I don't see it. And as a result, I think that we could continue to flatline or worse.
Philip, could I interject? It's worth pointing out that asset holders are also ordinary people. There's this thing that working people don't count people who work if they're very well off. Ordinary people don't count if you've got assets and have saved. Put that to one side. I want to talk to you about the so-called culture war issues we keep hearing about. No conversation has precipitated following the riots in the 7 most deprived towns across England following what happened in Southport. There's been no analysis, no engagement with communities, as we saw post-2011. And today, Sir Keir Starmer had the opportunity to address that. Instead, he talked about the populism being the backdrop for it. Do you think he's making a mistake here by kind of putting the book down hard on these communities, failing to engage with them, totally ignoring, by the way, what happened in Notting Hill over this weekend? There was great upset and crime there. That seems to be on a different page. Do you think there's a mistake to be made in not acknowledging the ordinary concerns of working class people in Britain who feel left behind?
Oh, very much so. I mean, I think this is all meat and drink for Nigel Farage and reform. I mean, the shift towards the Conservatives that we saw as a result of the Brexit referendum and indeed of Boris's unfulfilled promises to level up, that will only shift again. And you can see it in the absence of a visionary Conservative leader. You can see that all going to reform. Labour don't have even an unfulfilled plan to level up. This is what is worrying. So I do think that the evidence is really quite compelling for there being a 2-tier political and policing and criminal system. And those who enforce that 2-tier system do so for the sake of what they think is social peace. But what they're actually doing is further polarizing society. You look at America during the Black Lives Matter riots and how it was termed largely peaceful. We're on that track to sanction forms of disorder and unsanctioned forms of disorder. And once the greatness of Britain, why we've survived and why we've defeated some of the greatest kind of political evils in recent modern history is because we had broad consensus across the country. That consensus is now highly fractured, it's polarizing. And when it polarizes, if we get to the American situation, then we're in a very situation and we're on the way there. So I'm afraid your fears have real foundation, Martin.
Excellent comment, as ever, Philip Blond. It's an absolute pleasure to have on the show. And I think we're actually already there. We're already at the stage of mostly peaceful demonstrations, all protests, all carnivals, when it's one particular group having them. Philip Blond, always a delight to have you on the show. Please come back on soon. Excellent. Now, still to come, find out how our heroic boys in the RAF are living it. It will shock you in conditions, no doubt, they'll be described inhumane if they're asylum seekers. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled.
Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Joined now by the founder of Quintet London, Tamta Musulishvili, who channels her experience and fervour for fashion into her innovative brands which produce artworks on silk. You brought in some lovely things which we'll discuss in just a moment. Tell me a little bit about the complexity of printing an artist's idea onto silk. Is that a difficult thing to do?
It's actually very simple, because we just simply ask our clients a set of questions to find out what they like, their experiences, their favourite objects or anything they desire. We create out of this information preliminary sketch, show it to clients until it's perfect. We change it according to their needs.
Are you saying that everything that you're doing here is personalised to a client? It's a commission from a client?
Every single piece is totally unique. we make each individual piece for the client taste. So every single piece is totally different. And what is nice, for example, we do like wedding favors, corporate gifts, investors' gifts, and every single time we would match the theme throughout to the actual company theme and so on.
Now, here we have a series of little silk ties. Am I right to call them ties?
This one's actually called twillies. Twilly.
Yes. I didn't know the word twilly.
Yes.
These have a name. So this is the name of your client in this case. This one is Amanda, I think.
Exactly. So actually, these are our signature design. So if you want to give someone something quickly, but just simply add their names, you can order from our website, and you just simply need to insert their name, and we can produce it on your favorite color combination. But then, obviously, our main product is totally unique pieces which are bespoke.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:26. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, later in the show, I'll be speaking to Paul Durant. He's the 78-year-old pensioner from Blackpool on a hunger strike. We've got an astonishing development in that story. But before that, soldiers at an RAF base have said that their accommodation is in an unlivable condition. GB News can reveal that troops posted to RAF Benson in Oxfordshire are living in squalor amid leaking pipes and rat infestations. Well, our national reporter Charlie Peters has his exclusive story and joins us now. Charlie Peters, astonishing squalor that our boys are forced to live in, perhaps would be deemed unfit for habitation if they're asylum seekers. Tell us more.
Well, Martin, the soldier that spoke to GB News with this information about this accommodation said that they wanted it to be condemned. They said it wasn't fit for any person. And you've shown some of the photos there of the accommodation at RAF Benson, which is a frontline station for the RAF. It's where operational and support squadrons are based. But for those listening on the radio, it shows soaked floors in a mixed accommodation area. Pipes have been bursting. There have been significant leaking issues. There have been rat infestations on the ground floor, according to the soldier posted into that accommodation block. And the toilets aren't working. The heating isn't working. The hot water regularly falls away. And this is just a small example of a much wider issue. Earlier this year, a commission found that it'll cost up to £4 billion to sort out the backlog of repairs required by the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, DIO. Some soldiers refer to it as DI-No because they put in requests and they hear nothing. But Martin, as you alluded to, many analysts I spoke to and commentators, when I raised this issue yesterday and building the story for today, they said, and they referred to the double standards, as they put it, between accommodation that soldiers are expected to stay in and those that asylum seekers and illegal migrants crossing the Channel receive, referring to how plush hotels are put up for those crossing the Channel. £8 million a day being spent on that. But soldiers in this appalling accommodation are just expected to put up with it. They're expected to soldier on.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Charlie. And, for example, if Amnesty International or Care for Calais got a whiff of this behaviour, if it's at the Bibby Stockholm or somewhere like that, you know damn sure as mustard, Charlie Peters, this would get shut down. And yet, as you say, our boys and our girls in the RAF, the Army, they're expected just to crack on with it. It's not fair.
It is an extraordinary situation, and obviously press have to receive this information on condition of anonymity from soldiers. They're not permitted to speak out. Obviously, soldiers can't unionise. They rely on ministers fighting their case and their seniors and their leadership to make sure that this stuff gets fixed. But all too often, we hear these complaints from soldiers pointing to this shoddy squalor, squaddies in squalor in these accommodation blocks, which demonstrate that these fixes aren't occurring. This particular base at RAF Benson, this accommodation block, is also a transit accommodation block. So soldiers are just being posted to that location for training and for short-term courses, are expected to live alongside troops who are posted there permanently, which is not an ideal situation, to say the least. But a statement has been received from the MOD on this. A spokesperson told me that the new government is committed to improving the state of service housing as part of our drive to renew the nation's contract with those who serve. Our government's first King's Speech committed to the creation of a new Armed Forces Commissioner to be a strong, independent champion for service personnel and their families and help improve service life. Well, at the same time that statement was issued, and while all these accommodation concerns go on, the fact of the matter remains that the British Army is now at its lowest level since the Napoleonic era, some 300 years ago. Just 72,000 or so active personnel in the British Army. This is an RAF base, but this is an Army soldier posted there sending us this information. When you see accommodation like this, I have to say, I think it's hard to understand why people are so confused by the retention crisis in the British military.
Charlie Peters, another Kraken exclusive. Make sure you keep up this superb work. Thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Now, there's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including should the Notting Hill criminals be dealt with as fast as the rioters? But first, it's time for your news headlines, and it's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories. The Prime Minister has warned the October budget will be painful, but he says the country will have to accept short-term pain for long-term good. During his speech in Downing Street this morning, Sir Keir Starmer warned things will get worse before they get better, and next week's return to Parliament, he says, will not be business as usual. He also addressed the recent riots, saying they showed the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure. The Prime Minister also reiterated economic growth is the government's top priority. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly has accused Sir Keir Starmer of rolling out dishonest policies following today's speech. Israel's military says it's rescued a hostage who was kidnapped by the Hamas terror group on October 7th. The IDF say 52-year-old Qaid Farhad al-Qadi is in a stable condition and is being transferred for medical checks at a hospital following a complex operation in southern Gaza. The hostage's family's forum said in a statement his return home is nothing short of miraculous. It said he endured 326 days in captivity. A man has been charged with murder after officers stopped him at Notting Hill Carnival. Detectives had previously issued an appeal to locate Kamar Williams, who was wanted in connection with the fatal stabbing of 53-year-old Derek Thomas in Stoke Newington. He'll appear in court tomorrow. That's as 3 men have been arrested over the stabbing of a 32-year-old mother at Notting Hill Carnival, which left her in a critical condition. The woman was attending the family day on Sunday with her young child when she was attacked. The Metropolitan Police says it appears she became caught up in the middle of an altercation between 2 groups of men, but it's unclear if they were known to her. In total, 349 arrests were made over the Carnival weekend for a range of offences, including violence, sexual assaults and over 60 attacks on police officers. And finally, after lots of speculation, British pop band Oasis are officially reuniting nearly 15 years after they split. Liam and Noel Gallagher are getting back together for Oasis's long-awaited reunion with a worldwide tour. Next year, Oasis, who released their chart-topping album Definitely Maybe around 3 decades ago, announced these series of dates, kicking off their tour in Cardiff. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Tatiana Sanchez, and more from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3225 and €1.1844. The price of gold is £1,903.16 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,356 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, if you want to get in touch with me, you know what to do. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little bit later in the show. I'm especially interested. Has there been any condemnation of the Notting Hill arrests and violence yet from Sadiq Khan, the Prime Minister, or indeed anybody else on the political left? I'm all ears. Get them into me. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, British News Channel.
Good evening. From the Met Office, here's your latest GB News weather update. Whilst there is still a bit of rain around for some of us, across parts of the southeast, we're looking ahead to some hot weather tomorrow. That's because we're staying ahead of the front that's lingering across parts of the UK at the moment in the southeast, and so some warm or hot air pushing its way in. But where we're under the front as we go through this evening and overnight, there will be some more cloud and some rain. So particularly across parts of northern England, southern Scotland, but also Wales and the southwest later on, seeing some rain as well. Also some patches of mist and fog here. In the southeast, because of that warmer, hotter air, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount tonight, and in fact even further north, not turning particularly chilly because of the cloud and some showery rain across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So across Scotland, first thing, yes, there may be some heavier showery bursts perhaps clearing away, but on the whole for many it's starting largely dry, but some showers quickly moving into the far west of Scotland. Also the far west of Northern Ireland having some showers but drier further east, and then that front lingering across northern England bringing a damp start to the day here for some, and down western parts of Wales and southwest England also a bit of wet weather here. Further east though, lots of dry sunny weather to start the day tomorrow, particularly across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, and here it's going to stay largely fine through much of the day. Across the southwest, any rain's likely to break up, and so it's going to turn dry here. Meanwhile, across Scotland and Northern Ireland, heavy showery rain pushing its way in from the west. In the southeast, temperatures are going to be higher than today, highs of around 28 or 29 Celsius. As we go into Thursday, there will be more showers across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps northern and western England and Wales as well. But further south and east, you have a greater chance of staying dry with plenty of fine sunny weather. Temperatures won't be quite as high as tomorrow, but nonetheless feeling pleasantly warm in the sunshine, and there's more fine settled weather to come for most of us as we go through the end of the week. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Northumberland and the westbound A69. Now, that's still closed between the Hexham Road junction in Warden and the A686 at Hayden Bridge. A lorry fire there still causing delays. Westbound M56 at Wythenshawe Junction, 4 Lane closed on the exit slip there. There's a police incident ongoing, so it's queuing. Peckham Ryan London, the northbound A2215 is shut between Skiller Road and Nigel Road as emergency services deal with an incident that's causing queues. And the A20 out of town, the Swanley bypass, shut from Crittles Corner in Sidcup through towards the M25 at the Swanley interchange. There's overrunning roadworks causing delays into Sidcup on Maidstone Way and into Swanley as well this lunchtime. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:38. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, in the last hour, the Metropolitan Police have confirmed that 61 of its officers were assaulted at the Notting Hill Carnival. This is breaking news, which included kicks, punches, and even some officers being spat at. They also revealed that a total of 349 arrests were made over the Carnival weekend for offences ranging from drug possession, sexual assaults and robbery. Well, here to tell us more is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So now the arrest tally, the crime tally, is still going up. Mostly peaceful, they are described as by a broad range of the media, and to my knowledge, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen any condemnation of the violence yet from the Prime Minister or the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, in stark contrast to what we saw of the riots across the 7 most deprived towns across Britain. Tell us more.
Well, indeed, we know, of course, it's Carnival. It's an event that the politicians, of course, want to celebrate and encourage. So there often is a reluctance to come out and condemn any violence for, fear of upsetting communities. And as far as Notting Hill Carnival is concerned, we see levels of violence year after year. This has been a particularly violent year, there is no doubt, with those 8 stabbings across the weekend. 4 people who were in life-threatening condition, now down to 3 after one person stabilised. But they include a mother, 32-year-old woman, who was with her young child. On Sunday, of all days, Family Day, it's described as, is meant to be more peaceful. But she got in the way of a dispute between 2 rival gangs and was stabbed and critically injured. And of course, you mentioned there the number of police officers. That tally of injured officers has now risen to 61. And including the kicks and the punches and the spits, were some officers who were head-butted as well. Absolutely dreadful. The kind of violence that has been roundly condemned when it's happened in other towns and cities across England in recent weeks, with the Prime Minister and others lining up to show us just how quickly justice would deal with those involved in such aggressive acts against members of the emergency services. But, in saying that about one issue of violence in communities, then surely you've got to be consistent and also then call out what has happened at the Notting Hill Carnival. But as you say, Martin, nothing from Mayor Sadiq Khan, other than posting over the weekend on X, where he praised Notting Hill Carnival for bringing together communities. You can see that posting on your screen now. So nothing in the hours and days since that initial post to reflect the fact that his own officers, because remember, as the Mayor of London, he is the Police and Crime Commissioner for the capital, so nothing to reflect that 61 of his own officers were assaulted while going about their duty and trying to keep people safe at the Carnival. And nothing, of course, from the Prime Minister, who held an expansive news conference in Downing Street this morning and told us during that conference all about what he was doing to ensure that the violence we've seen in towns and cities of recent weeks would be dealt with robustly. But again, no mention of what was happening just a few miles away from his own doorstep.
Mark White, it's just been pointed out to me by an eagle-eyed GB News viewer that Sadiq Khan has just tweeted. He's tweeted about a memorial to the victims of the transatlantic slave trade, a stark reminder of the role that the UK and London played. That's another comment from the Mayor, not a dicky bird, about this unrest. A serious question now, though, Mark White. We revealed yesterday the cost of the policing operation around Notting Hill last year was 11.75 million. That included £5.5 million, Mark White, on police overtime, because, of course, this happens over a bank holiday weekend. Mark White, with 7,000 coppers put on duty this year, you'd expect this is going to be even more expensive. And it's worth pointing out, is it not, Mark White, that the event itself doesn't pay a penny towards this?
No, and of course, a comparison probably is best served with looking at what happens with football matches. And of course, we've had football hooliganism roundly condemned over the years, and the fact that police have to expend an awful lot of time and effort ensuring that football matches are peaceful affairs. Well, football clubs, even though they've been criticised for not providing enough money to policing, do at least pay for policing within the stadia and also in the immediate environs around football stadiums, where they will pay police for that service. There is still a wider cost of policing football matches that is borne by the police service. But as you say, compare that to Notting Hill Carnival with 7,000 officers on duty, many more than would ever be on duty, even for a very busy football weekend in the capital, with 7 Premier League clubs and countless other lower division clubs. They would still never have 7,000 officers devoted to policing all of those matches at the same time. But Notting Hill Carnival does not provide any financial recompense to the Metropolitan Police for the police and the overtime that is expended on keeping people safe at that event.
And Mark White, we talk all the time about two-tier policing, and a lot of accusations of that, of course, following the aftermath of those riots. Brings me on to this astonishing story out today. Perhaps the people at Notting Hill will just be able to say sorry. A new report today, Mark White, saying that 147,000 people accused of serious offences, including sex crimes, violence and weapons possession, will simply be allowed to say sorry instead of going to jail. Please tell me this is an April Fool's joke.
Well, these are community resolution orders. It's slightly more complicated than just an apology, but it does require police to get the approval of victims, for instance, to try to ensure, we're told, that those who are committing an offence are first-time offenders, that the offences are low-level offences such as antisocial behaviour. But I'm not sure that's completely borne out with the facts that we're getting through of very significant rises in the numbers of violent offences that seem to be dealt with via a community resolution order rather than a criminal sanction, a prosecution that may lead to a fine or even perhaps jail, depending on how serious it is. Also, knife possession, 77% increase in the number of community resolution orders that have been handed out for people caught carrying knives at a time when we have record levels of knife crime in 8 force areas, including the Metropolitan Police, where they recorded almost 15,000 knife crime offences last year. You would think that perhaps the real logical path to be going on is not to invoke a community resolution in such cases, but perhaps to have a tougher sanction to try to deter people from carrying these deadly weapons in the first place.
Mark White, an astonishing roundup there. Thank you very, very much, and we'll see you again in the next hour. Brilliant. Thank you. Now, moving on, today is going to be the day, you know where this is going, the Oasis return, hooray, I'm in Wonderwall and all the rest of it. Look, on a serious point, I think this story is bigger than music. It's about a return to working class swagger. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Prince Harry also revealed that he wouldn't bring his wife Meghan Markle back to the UK over safety concerns.
Let's talk to royal correspondent Michael Cole.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning, Ellie. I mean, they live in California. I'm not sure what the murder rate is there, but that's a more dangerous place than Britain's at any time of the day. And of course, he compromised his own safety when he said in his book, Spare, his autobiography, which was Ghost Britain, that he'd personally killed 25 Taliban when he was serving with the British Army in Afghanistan. Well, that painted a target for life on the back of himself and his family. which was a very unwise thing for him to do. The other thing which struck me, it was that he invoked the name of the late Queen, saying that he'd had several conversations with his grandmother, and she'd been very, very supportive in his battle. He sees himself, and it's the word he's used, as a dragon slayer against the popular press, the tabloid press, and he's continuing with that. Of course, his brother, Prince William, has settled, but also in the programme was Hugh Grant. Now, Hugh Grant also has settled, as indeed did I, when I received an apology from News Group. I believe in a free and unfettered press. Newspapers are having a bad time at the moment, losing circulation, losing advertising. Young people don't read newspapers. And so I felt that the right thing to do was to settle. I didn't want to take punitive action against newspapers.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Sally can wait, she knows it's too... Whoops, sorry. Welcome back to the show. 3:50 at the time. This is Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, you probably got it. Oasis are back after a lot of speculation. They are officially reunited nearly 15 years after the two brothers Grimm split up. They'll play 14 UK shows next summer. Let's speak now to an old pal of mine, James McMahon, who hosts his own podcast and used to be the editor of Kerrang, as well as a bigwig on the NME. Jim, I'm so sorry about my tortuous singing there, but then again, you weren't ever the biggest fan of Oasis, were you?
Oh, mate, behave. I was a sensitive, wilting indie pop flower, but when it came to Oasis, all bets were off. This is the greatest day of the last 15 years. I feel like normality is about to return. I'm over the moon.
Superb. Do you think that there's more to this? Like, people have been through their own lives, or people have separated. Oasis have been a kind of continuum in their lives. They're looking to this reunion as an emotional get back to a former time, a greater time, the emotional swagger of the working classes, something that's been missing for a long time. I think this is bigger than music, Jim.
Absolutely. And I think that you only have to see the reaction from many of my peers as a reflection of how elitist and detached media, as you know, look at the channel we're having the conversation on, right? So you're fully aware of what I'm talking about, but that has extended to the music press. And I think you only have to see the reaction of people who do what I do to this news to see that we're talking about a media that is very out of touch with what the common people, which I say in the most affectionate way possible, actually feel about things. I feel like when you speak to actual people on the street, not that I've been out on the street today, but, you know, when you see social media and such like, then I think you see people who are so excited. And it isn't just nostalgia, it's that these songs still speak to people about their lives. They speak to regular people about their lives. I read this fantastic article the other day about how the working classes, they only really had football now. You know, there's so much wrong with the towns and the cities of the north of England. They've got music as well. And but there's no one who's come along in the last 15 years that embodies that working class spirit like Oasis. I feel like Oasis aren't just a band who have good songs. They're not just a good band from the 90s. They are a band that inspire aspiration in people. They're about being bigger, making your life better, about being a rock and roll star. And I can't think of anything that Britain needs more in 2025 than that.
Do you know what? I'm actually stunned here because you're absolutely bang on the money, Jim. I think you're exactly right. There's so much snobbery around the working classes, around their music, around their lifestyle, around their towns, around their politics, everything about them. And the comfort blanket of music has been kind of taken away. Football is being eroded as this kind of nefarious pursuit of the knuckle draggers. Oasis, the theme tune to our childhood, is now back to reunite us again. James McMahon, I thought that was poetic. Seriously, mate, I'm being serious. That was brilliant, mate. Thank you very, very much. Oh, you're going to go? How many times are you going to go, mate?
Well, the phone has been popping off today. I'll tell you a story very, very quickly. I've been in hospital recently.
We haven't got time, mate. Come back tomorrow. Let's do it again tomorrow. It's time for the end of this hour. Superb, mate. Now, moving on. Great Manchester Police has announced it will not take part in next year's Gay Pride March. Is this a victory for common sense? I'll be back soon. National weather with Alex Burker.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. A bit of rain to come through the next couple of days and a little bit of cloud at times too, but towards the southeast it's actually looking largely fine, and here it's going to be pretty hot because we are ahead of this frontal system that's lying across us, and it's this front that's brought a fair amount of rain and will continue to do so through this evening and overnight across parts of northern England, into the West Midlands, across Wales, maybe southwest England seeing a bit of rain too. Towards the northwest there'll be some showery rain around, and some of this could be a little bit on the heavy side across parts of Scotland, but in the southeast here it's staying largely dry. We have some warm air, and so temperatures here not dropping a huge amount despite the fact that there will be some clear skies. So a pretty fine start for much of the Midlands, parts of East Anglia and southern southeastern England on Wednesday morning. Across the southwest, watch out for some mist and fog patches and a bit of rain around too. Also some rain for parts of Wales and northwest England first thing, and some further showery rain feeding into western parts of Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland as well. Further east across both of Scotland and Northern Ireland it's looking drier, although there could be some showery bursts around. More showery rain then feeding its way across parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland as we go through the day, and we still have a front lingering across some parts of Northern England, pushing into the Midlands perhaps, albeit this front doesn't look like it will bring much widespread rain. It just could bring some heavy outbreaks for some of us. Towards the south-southeast of the UK it's looking largely dry, some bright sunny spells, and with that temperatures higher than today, likely to get into the high 20s, highs of around 28 or 29 Celsius perhaps. Some showery rain then continuing across particularly Scotland as we go through the end of the day on Wednesday, but a lot of that then does clear through as we go overnight. And then there's plenty of dry weather to come as we go through the end of the week, but do watch out for some showers, particularly towards the north and west on Thursday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley, Northumberland, and both sides of the A69 now closed between the Hexham Road junction in Warden and Hayden Bridge for the A686. There's a lorry fire there, still causing delays either side of the closure. A couple of issues clockwise for the M25, 17 to 18, Maple Cross to Chorleywood. The inside lane's coned off, a collision that's causing delays, and then there's also a vehicle having a tyre change clockwise, junction 7 to Reigate at junction 8 again, lane 1's out of action. Out of town, the A20, the Swanley bypass shut from Crittles Corner in Sidcup towards the M25 at Swanley and Queuing. There's overrunning roadworks. And in Holloway in London, the northbound side of the Camden Road is blocked by Hill Martin Road. There's been an accident as part blocked, causing queues. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win an incredible £30,000 in cash, and you could be getting that winning call from us to tell you that you're our next Great British Giveaway winner.
Well, I can't believe this. Oh my God, this is amazing.
That is absolutely fantastic.
We're over the moon.
I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh, you shocked me. I never won a penny in my life.
If I was there, I'll buy you a drink.
Get your entry in now for another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash. Text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, does misery await the nation? Well, Sir Keir Starmer braces the public for hard times ahead as he lays the foundations for what seems to be a brutal forthcoming budget. He says he'll clean up the country like he cleaned up the riots, but are you convinced? And the Duke of Sussex will finally release his memoir Spare in paperback format, but it won't be updated with details about his father's reign. Is this an olive branch? No more salacious gossip? Is it sense at last from the ginger Prince Harry? And Paul Durant, the 78-year-old Blackpool granddad, is now 24 days into his heroic hunger strike of what he calls a broken Britain. Today, Paul will exclusively tell GB News how he has endured 2 sickening, unprovoked attacks in recent days by guess who? Pro-Palestine protesters harassing a 78-year-old granddad in Blackpool. I'll speak to the intrepid pensioner on the show a little bit later on. And Greater Manchester Police did not take part in next year's Gay Pride March, and I'll be joined by a campaigner who claims that this is a long overdue victory for common sense policing. And that's all coming between now and 6 o'clock. Welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. Paul Durant, for those who remember, came into the studio about a week ago, 78-year-old pensioner on a hunger strike over illegal immigration, 2-tiered policing, and the trampled feeling he believes the working classes in Britain have. 24 days now is that hunger strike. He's been harangued by protesters twice in recent days while out on the streets of Blackpool doing his peaceful protest. An astonishing state of affairs when a pensioner is picked on by much younger, aggressive people supporting the Palestinian cause. Does this do any favours for their cause? We'll speak to him soon on this show. And also, the Pride March has been dropped by Manchester Police next year. I'll be joined by a campaigner who thinks that is a huge breakthrough and a victory for common sense policing. Get in touch, gbnews.com/you'll say. But now it's your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has warned the October budget will be painful, but he says the country will have to accept short-term pain for long-term good. During his speech in Downing Street this morning, Sir Keir Starmer warned things will get worse before they get better. And next week's return to Parliament, he says, will not be business as usual. He also addressed the recent riots, saying they showed the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure. The Prime Minister also reiterated economic growth is the government's top priority.
I promised that we would get a grip on the problems that we face and that we would be judged by our actions, not by our words. I said before the election, and I say it again really clearly today, growth, and frankly by that I do mean wealth creation, is the #1 priority of this Labour government.
This comes as the Prime Minister faces pressure over accusations of cronyism as Conservatives demand an investigation into recent civil service appointments. Speaking earlier on GB News, Shadow Science and Technology Secretary Andrew Griffith suggested it was hypocritical for Labour to talk about trust in politics.
In particular, he promised to introduce new levels of transparency and integrity, and yet what we've seen week by week over the last few weeks over the summer is revelations about Labour appointments to the civil service, the independent civil service. These aren't just the normal special advisors that all governments make political appointments to. These are some of the top roles in the independent civil service that Labour's been giving to donors and its political supporters. So it's pretty rich to talk about trust in politics at the same time as that.
Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner says it was horrific to see the damage done to the Dagenham tower block that caught fire yesterday. Everyone was accounted for and no injuries reported after a major incident was declared following the fire in East London. Over 100 people were evacuated from the building, with 2 people taken to hospital. Angela Rayner says the London Fire Brigade has launched a full investigation.
That's horrific to hear that, and I know that the London Fire Brigade have already started an investigation, and I don't want to preempt that investigation, but we've got to make sure that people have fire escape routes. It's an obligation, it's a legal obligation. I'll be meeting the Health and Safety Executive and the Building Safety Regulators tomorrow to ensure that everybody's aware of their obligations, their legal requirements, and to ensure that people do have that safety route, and to make sure that those alarms and those systems that have been put in place are there to make sure that people are safely out of buildings and that they're aware of the fire if one happens and what happens in those circumstances.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu congratulated the hostage who was held by the Hamas terror group since the 7th of October following his release. He says the entire people of Israel were moved by his being freed. Israel's military rescued 52-year-old Qaid Farhan al-Qadi, who's in a stable condition and is being transferred for medical checks at a hospital following a complex operation in southern Gaza. The hostage's family's forum said in a statement, his return home is nothing short of miraculous. It said he endured 326 days in captivity. A man has been charged with murder after officers stopped him at Notting Hill Carnival. Detectives had previously issued an appeal to locate Kamar Williams, who was wanted in connection with the fatal stabbing of 53-year-old Derek Thomas in Stoke Newington. He'll appear in court tomorrow. That's as 3 men have been arrested over the stabbing of a 32-year-old mother at Notting Hill Carnival, which left her in a critical condition. The woman was attending the family day on Sunday with her young child when she was attacked. The Metropolitan Police says it appears she became caught up in the middle of an altercation between 2 groups of men, but it's unclear if they were known to her. In total, just over 349 arrests were made over the Carnival weekend for a range of offences, including violence, sexual assaults and 60 attacks on police officers. President Zelensky says Ukraine has successfully run a test of its first ballistic missile. It comes after Russia's launched around 200 drone and missile attacks at Ukraine overnight. At least 5 people have been killed and dozens more injured due to the strikes, which are believed to be in response to Ukraine's incursion in Russia's Kursk region. Meanwhile, Volodymyr Zelensky said it was vile and claimed the attack had targeted civilian infrastructure. And after a lot of speculation, British pop band Oasis are officially reuniting nearly 15 years after they split. Liam and Noel Gallagher are getting back together for Oasis's long-awaited reunion with a worldwide tour in 2025. Oasis, who released their chart-topping album Definitely Maybe around 3 decades ago, announced the series of dates kicking off their tour in Cardiff. Local people in Manchester are excited about the news.
Yeah, very excited. It's going to be interesting to see how long it lasts for, though, because you never know with those.
Yeah, I'm really happy. I'm going to try for tickets on Saturday.
Excited about it, but probably won't get tickets.
I'm going to get me mum and dad to try and get on it for me as well, but yeah. I'm buzzing, me. I'm a massive Oasis fan. I've seen Liam Gallagher a few times, but together, man, it'll be sick, yeah.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, some breaking news for you now. And Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner has been visiting the scene of a major high-rise fire in Dagenham, as you can see on your screens there. 45 engines and around 225 firefighters responded to the blaze in East London, with more than 100 people having to be evacuated, with 2 taken to hospital. And this is what the Deputy Prime Minister had to say.
I mean, it's incredibly horrific to see the flats and to see the level of damage, but it's also heroic to see the frontline emergency workers that were first responders here on the scene in the middle of a bank holiday, early hours of the morning, making sure that they got everybody out safely and then looking at how they could get the fire under control. I'm incredibly grateful for the firefighters, the emergency services and the local authority that did everything they could to ensure that people were out of the building.
Residents have told us that there were no fire alarms that they could hear. It was only through their neighbours' efforts that they got out. And when they came to get out of the area here, one of the gates to their escape route was padlocked. What do you make of that? Do you believe that account, and what will you do about it?
I mean, that's horrific to hear that, and I know that the London Fire Brigade have already started an investigation, and I don't want to preempt that investigation, but we've got to make sure that people have fire escape routes. It's an obligation, it's a legal obligation. I'll be meeting the Health and Safety Executive and the Building Safety Regulators tomorrow to ensure that everybody's aware of their obligations, their legal requirements, and to ensure that people do have that safety route, and to make sure that those alarms and those systems that have been put in place are there to make sure that people are safely out of buildings and that they're aware of the fire if one happens and what happens in those circumstances.
That's worth mentioning. It's 7 years on now from the Grenfell disaster, and there have been a succession of Housing Minister's colleague at GBNews just told me during a Freedom of Information Act, it came out that over 300,000 people are still at risk from dangerous cladding. And after this latest fire, horrific information there, Angela Rayner conveying that escape routes were padlocked shut. Angela Rayner is now the Housing Minister after years and years and years of the buck being passed. Let's see and let's hope that she does finally something about this astonishing, neglectful situation. Now, moving on, the Prime Minister has warned us all that the October budget is going to be quite painful. Full of optimism, as always, Sir Keir Starmer also said that things are worse than they ever imagined because of that economic black hole left by the Tory government. £22 billion, the size of that black hole. But don't worry, because apparently the pain will be in the short term and worth it in the long run. Let's see what he had to say a little bit earlier on.
Those with the broadest shoulders should bear the heavier burden. And that's why we're cracking down on non-doms. Those who made the mess should have to do their bit to clean it up. And that's why we're strengthening the powers of the water regulator and backing tough fines on the water companies that have let sewage flood our rivers, lakes and seas. But just as when I responded to the riots, I'll have to turn to the country and make big asks of you as well. To accept short-term pain for long-term good, the difficult trade-off for the genuine solution. And I know that after all that you have been through, that is a really big ask and really difficult to hear. That is not the position we should be in. It's not the position I want to be in. But we have to end the politics of the easy answer that solves nothing.
Well, a lot of people at that last general election were told we can turn a page, have a fresh start. Does it feel like a fresh start to you? Well, joining me now to discuss this is our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, the words there were very sombre, painful, big asks, long-term gain for short-term pain, the broadest shoulders having to pay the most, no easy answers. This was a sombre, a sober and a rather doom-laden speech.
It was really. I mean, Labour have got this huge majority, and we always knew that things were going to be difficult for them coming in. They admitted that. But now they're saying that things are dramatically worse than they could ever have imagined, that there's a £22 billion black hole in the public finances, and basically they have heavily implied that come the budget, taxes are going to have to rise. Now, that is going to be difficult, given, of course, they didn't want to dwell on this, understandably, during the election campaign. Neither the Conservatives or Labour. This is something that the Institute for Fiscal Studies got very exercised about, saying, look, there's going to be the cuts to public services, tax rises, or you're going to have to break your borrowing rules, or some combination. Nobody wanted to talk about it before. And lo and behold, now we're told things are so much worse. Now, fair enough. Some of this money, the Office for Budget Responsibility apparently didn't know about, but they did know that things were going to be difficult. So now we've got a government that came along saying they had no plans to raise taxes on working people, but it looks very much like they are now. OK, they're not going to raise income tax. They're not going to raise VAT, except on private school fees. They're not going to raise national insurance. But capital gains tax is paid by plenty of working people. Inheritance tax is paid by plenty of working people. We don't know what the tax rises are going to be, but it sounds inevitable that they are coming. And I think what he's doing here is laying the groundwork for very painful choices coming down the line. And
there's also been quite a lot of scandal recently about cronyism, about passers for glassers from a big Labour donor. He was asked about that earlier, right?
Yes, he was. One of the things that he said in the Rose Garden was that he's determined to restore honesty and integrity to government. But he was asked by several journalists about a variety of jobs to people in the civil service, people that had close Labour links, or Conservative donors, the one you referenced, Lord Ali, who was given a pass to Downing Street. And he really did not want to discuss it. Let's take a look now at what he had to say when he was asked about that.
Look, Andy, most of these allegations and accusations are coming from the very people that dragged our country down in the first place. So you'll forgive me if I take that approach to it. We are going to fix the foundations. We've got to do it at speed, and I'm determined to have the right people in the right places to allow us to get on with that job. I'm enormously aware of how big a task this is and how we have to move at pace. And that's why we're getting the best people into the best jobs. But I'm not really going to take lectures on this from the people who dragged our country so far down in the last few years. Thank you.
So what we had there, and another journalist asked him later, and we had similar, was basically, look at how awful the Tories were. And let's face it, of course, Labour have got this large majority, largely because so many people were cross with the Conservatives, rather than that there's an overwhelming enthusiasm for them. But he didn't answer, nor did the Prime Minister's spokesman. I was at the lobby briefing later. They were questioned over and over again, the specifics about some of these appointments. So I think it's all very well. They've made this big play saying we're going to clean up politics. But I think this is problematic. We're not even 2 months into this new administration.
Catherine Forster, excellent stuff. And let's continue this chat now, because I'm joined by the former Labour advisor, Matthew Torbett. Matthew, welcome to the show. An absolute delight to have you on. My old son, big fan of yours. We were expecting positivity. We were expecting change. Turn a page, a fresh dawn. And today didn't feel like a fresh dawn. It felt like the rain clouds are gathering over the country, and in particular, those who earn the most. This is a return to old school socialism, is it not? There's going to be a huge tax raid on the wealthiest. And historically, we know what happens there, Matthew. They clear off abroad.
God, I wish it was a return to socialism. I don't think that's quite the case. I did think it was interesting when he said, we're gonna go after people, not go after, but we're gonna tax people that can sort of well afford it. It reminded me of a speech Hugh Gateskill gave as Labour Chancellor just after the war, in which he said, we need to reward the people that have helped us through this war. So we're going to tax those who have got the big incomes and reward those on the little incomes, because they're the ones that can well afford it. I think it's interesting that he almost is doing that a little bit. He's obviously going to be looking at tax rises in the budget. That's obviously what he's put forward. He's committed again today to cuts to the winter fuel allowance, and therefore public sector pay workers are getting a reward. But when it's those that are the broadest shoulders bearing the heavier burden, as he said, it makes me wonder, are we going to see a rise to corporation tax? Are we going to see rises to capital gains? Does that mean he's going to U-turn on the two-child benefit cap so that families aren't stuck in poverty? I'm not really sure whether that'll be the case, and I suppose, it will remain to be seen what Rachel Reeves does on budget day.
Matthew, you're a working class lad like me. You come from towns that have experienced some unrest over recent times, huge frustrations those communities feel. They tell us all the time here on GB News about uncontrolled immigration, a feeling of being left behind, that levelling up never happened. They voted for things like Brexit. This gentleman on the screen, Sir Keir Starmer, tried to stop that. And when they complained and stood up, a lot of them were jailed rather sharpishly, and today we heard more from Sir Keir Starmer on those riots, saying they exposed a deeply unhealthy society. But rather than engaging in any kind of understanding, a conversation about the frustrations in those communities, instead Sir Keir Starmer doubled down on this talk of populism fueling it. Matthew Talbot, do you think we should have less of the dictatorial whip cracking from the Prime Minister? And how about listening and engaging, just like we saw after the riots in 2011?
Yeah, so I think you're right in part. I think politically he'd be wise to continue what he's doing, and I'll explain why. I agree with you. I joined the streets in solidarity in 2020 with Black Lives Matter protesters, and I felt it was the right thing to do. I think from that, we had a discussion with ourselves as a society, in politics and in media, on why do people feel like this? How did we get to this place? And therefore, what can be done for us to maybe get to a point of better racial equality and better community cohesion? And we listened to people. I think it's right that we did. Whether anything's come out of that will be, judgment for another time. I do therefore think, and I don't think the two situations are directly comparable, but people obviously feel a certain way. Now, I disagree with the way people go about it. There's obviously racist elements to that when you're trying to go into hotels and set fire to them. That isn't the case for everybody that was there, and I think we should have a discussion on why people feel the way they do, how have we got to this point, and therefore what can we do going forward. Politically, though, I think Keir probably is right in not talking about it necessarily or opening up that conversation, because whether it be Germany in the 1930s, places like London in the 1950s, and even the 1980s with the National Front of the BNP, the far right always do very well in poor economic circumstances. So therefore, if he continues to put forward, a platform of potential change, investing in public services and putting more money in people's pockets, you would hope a lot of that ill feeling does go away more naturally. And he obviously avoids the very awkward conversations that he might not want to have over immigration.
Matthew, I think a lot of people were with you on that conversation there until you mentioned 1930s Germany and the far right. And isn't that the problem with people from the political left at the moment? It's like we were just about to have a fruitful conversation there about the frustrations, the immense anger, like it or not, that it's been expressed. You said you sympathise with that anger during the Black Lives Matter protest, but there's been no political sympathy for the anger expressed during the recent riots. And I totally agree with you. No one is saying that you should set fire to things or bash up coppers. That's the wrong approach. But that comes from a position of feeling disenfranchised, of feeling ignored, and when you answer back, just getting sent to prison. I put it to you again. Do you think Matthew Talbot, that Sir Keir Starmer is just being a bit too hardline? And we need to... I think it's vital we have those conversations.
I think it's vital, and to be clear, I'm not necessarily drawing a parallel to 1930s Germany. I know it's very easy to pull on things like that and call people Nazis and racists and fascists and whatever else. That's not what I'm doing, but what I was doing is trying to draw the fact that 1930s Germany was in the doldrums economically, and it allowed somebody like Hitler to come to power and say, look, I'll give you all full employment, we need to get and picked his own scapegoat. The only similarity at the moment is I think there is an element of scapegoating. But it shows that the far right do well in poor economic crises. And I think, listen, it might have been nice if Keir had have stood up and said, look, and I'm speaking directly to those of you that were involved, I won't put up with any sort of law breaking and abusing the police and setting fire to citizens' advice bureaus, just totally mindless. But I hear you. I know people are frustrated. And actually, if you want to play politics with it, you can say, because you've been ignored for 14 years by a Conservative government, I want to put people first. I want to build back communities. I want to level up, whatever term you want to give. So maybe that would be wise, but I'm hoping... and I'm sure he's hoping that over the next 5 and maybe 10 years, if they invest in public services, they invest in people, reward people with money in their pockets, that can quell a lot of the anger that's out there.
Matthew Talbot, I really, really think we need to have a serious conversation about immigration and what that's doing. The 7 most disenfranchised communities across Britain with the highest proportion of asylum seekers, that's where the riots occurred. These events are not unconnected. Matthew Talbot, expansive conversation, always a delight. Please come on again. Thank you very, very much for joining us today. Now, an olive branch from Prince Harry at last. We'll find out why next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Paul Spires is a much-loved part of this South London community.
When I first got here, it was so quiet, and after 3 months, I decided to buy myself a speaker. I started playing music. Everyone loved it.
So when 200 residents from Beckenham chipped in more than £3,000 to send a sweeper on a summer break to Portugal, it was a moment of great local spirit.
I'm overwhelmed with it. I'm just here to do a job to the best of my ability, and the way they've reacted is brilliant.
Lisa Knight, an estate agent, said she started the campaign after becoming friends with Mr Spears.
Last Monday, I bumped into him after work. It was a 30-degree day and he'd been working all day. So we stood and had a chat like we often do. And he explained to me that it was his birthday on Tuesday and he wanted to save up to go to Portugal because he's only ever been abroad once for his 60th birthday. And after he left, I decided to make the GoFundMe. So we shared it on the local Beckenham Appreciation Group on Facebook, which is huge, and it just flew away.
But Mr Spears was unable to take the trip due to his employer's rules on accepting gifts. A solution appeared when a travel company spotted an opportunity to help out.
onthebeach.com had an amazing idea to run a competition whereby Paul would be the winner. He had to be aged between the age of 62 and 64, be loved in Beckenham, have the surname Spears and love Elvis, and so he still gets to go on holiday.
We only have matched that £3,000 to donated to who I have wanted nominated, and obviously cancer research, which they've already done.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one
will be cancelled. Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:28. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Prince Harry is finally set to bring out the paperback edition of his memoir Spare, but without any more updates from its hardback format. So, is the Duke of Sussex offering an olive branch as Princess Kate and his father battle with cancer? Well, do you remember this would be, I think, the first decent decision that Prince Harry has made in a long time. There are a lot of conversations that we've had on this channel about would there be more salacious content, because ordinarily when a paperback edition of a hardback comes out, there's an addendum, there's salacious extra content thrown in, there's updates. Now, don't forget, that updated period would have been when the King and indeed Catherine were struggling with cancer. So to discuss this now, I'm joined by the former senior gardener to King Charles, Jack Stooks. Jack, welcome to the show. Delight to have you on. I think a lot of people, Jack, will be breathing a sigh of relief that the paperback edition doesn't have anything more salacious in there. What's your thoughts?
I think he's pretty much said what he wanted to say in the initial book, hasn't he? And it was quite a difficult one. I think when he left, I think felt he wanted to be heard. He wanted everybody to know his side of the story. And whenever he tried to speak, I think that it was all met with very much negativity. So hence, I think that he decided, I'm going to write this book. I'm going to let everybody know my opinions, my feelings, and my thoughts. Well, you know, a few years on now, having obviously written it, having it come out, having had different things happen with family, different things happen with different friends, things have moved on, things have moved forward. And I don't think he needs to write anything more or add anything more. You know, we've seen it all now. We've heard his side of the story. We've seen everything that the press has to say.
And Jack, you appear to be a sympathiser towards Prince Harry. Do you think he gets too much of a hard time? Do you think he's a misunderstood prince? And are you hoping there could be a family reunion?
I do hope that there will at some point be some kind of reunion of sorts. I don't think we can go back exactly to where we were. However, he is an amazing person. I was lucky enough to know him personally when I worked there. I thought he was a great person. Happy to chip in and do everything that everybody else would do staff-wise. You know, he's the kind of down-to-earth person that we would all like and warm to. And I think that, you know, with what happened with the book, it did sort of change people's opinions and change people's minds over him. But if we remember back to the wedding, which I was there, but a lot of people saw that on screens. You know, a lot of other people were lucky enough to go. He wanted everybody to join in the wedding. I remember, you know, he was inviting different people that he didn't even know that came to the wedding. There was some amazing people that were lucky enough to go, that even we sort of got to see and chat to, and they were just so thrilled to be there. And the press at the time were very much for him, and, you know, for the cause of this new amazing royal family that we've got, Meghan Markle coming into the family, and everything was really positive. But yeah, somewhere along the line, I think the rift started happening, and I'm not sure if it was perhaps partially to do with the press, you know, sort of going, let's pit Meghan and Kate together and see if we can come up with some kind of fight that we can then put out in the press. And maybe it went wrong, and so somewhere along the line, because Harry suddenly said, no, you're not going to do that to me. You did it to my mum, and you did it to Sarah Ferguson at the time, I think that it was. And he sort of thought, not again. So I do warm to Harry, yes. But again, all the family are lovely. They are all amazing.
Well, Jack, we're going to have to get you back on again because I haven't been able to ask you about your fascinating job, former senior gardener to King Charles. But look, the Gallagher brothers have had a dramatic reunion. Could there be a Windsor brothers reunion? I think the whole nation would like to see that at another time. Jack, please come back on the show. Fantastic guests. Jack Stooks, the former senior gardener to King Charles. Thank you very, very much for joining us and have a fantastic afternoon. Now, lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including Greater Manchester Police will not take part in next year's Gay Pride March. Common sense policing at last. I'll be joined by the man who's forced that campaign forward. But first, here's your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. The Prime Minister has warned the October budget will be painful, but he says the country will have to accept short-term pain for long-term good. During his speech in Downing Street this morning, Sir Keir Starmer warned things will get worse before they get better. And he said next week's return to Parliament will not be business as usual. He also addressed the recent riots, saying they showed the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure. The Prime Minister also reiterated economic growth is the government's top priority. Shadow Home Secretary James Cleverly has accused Sir Keir Starmer of rolling out dishonest policies following today's speech. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner said it was horrific to see the damage done to the Dagenham tower block that caught fire yesterday. Everyone was accounted for and no injuries reported after a major incident was declared following the fire in East London. Over 100 people were evacuated from the building, with 2 people taken to hospital. Angela Rayner says the London Fire Brigade has launched a full investigation. A man has been charged with murder after officers stopped him at Notting Hill Carnival. Detectives had previously issued an appeal to locate Kamar Williams, who was wanted in connection with the fatal stabbing of 53-year-old Derek Thomas in Stoke Newington. He'll appear in court tomorrow. That's as 3 men have been arrested over the stabbing of a 32-year-old mother at Notting Hill Carnival, which left her in a critical condition. The woman was attending the family day on Sunday with her young child when she was attacked. The Metropolitan Police says it appears she became caught up in the middle of an altercation between 2 groups of men, but it's unclear if they were known to her. In total, 349 arrests were made over the Carnival weekend for a range of offences, including violence, sexual assaults and over 60 attacks on police officers. And after lots of speculation, British pop band Oasis are officially reuniting nearly 15 years after they split. Liam and Noel Gallagher are getting back together for Oasis's long-awaited reunion with a worldwide tour in 2025. Oasis, who released their chart-topping album Definitely Maybe around 3 decades ago, announced the series of dates kicking off their tour in Cardiff. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, if you want to get in touch with me, you know what to do. Go to gbnews.com/your say. I'll read out the best of your comments a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. We're Britain's news channel.
Good evening. From the Met Office, here's your latest GB News weather update. Whilst there is still a bit of rain around for some of us, across parts of the southeast, we're looking ahead to some hot weather tomorrow. That's because we're staying ahead of the front that's lingering across parts of the UK at the moment in the southeast, and so some warm or hot air pushing its way in. But where we're under the front as we go through this evening and overnight, there will be some more cloud and some rain. So particularly across parts of northern England, southern Scotland, but also Wales and the southwest later on, seeing some rain as well. Also some patches of mist and fog here. In the southeast, because of that warmer, hotter air, temperatures aren't going to drop a huge amount tonight, and in fact even further north, not turning particularly chilly because of the cloud and some showery rain across parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. So across Scotland, first thing, yes, there may be some heavier showery bursts perhaps clearing away, but on the whole for many it's starting largely dry, but some showers quickly moving into the far west of Scotland. Also the far west of Northern Ireland having some showers but drier further east, and then that front lingering across northern England bringing a damp start to the day here for some, and down western parts of Wales and southwest England also a bit of wet weather here. Further east though, lots of dry sunny weather to start the day tomorrow, particularly across the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast, and here it's going to stay largely fine through much of the day. Across the southwest, any rain's likely to break up, and so it's going to turn dry here. Meanwhile, across Scotland and Northern Ireland, heavy showery rain pushing its way in from the west. In the southeast, temperatures are going to be higher than today, highs of around 28 or 29 Celsius. As we go into Thursday, there will be more showers across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, perhaps northern and western England and Wales as well. But further south and east, you have a greater chance of staying dry with plenty of fine sunny weather. Temperatures won't be quite as high as tomorrow, but nonetheless feeling pleasantly warm in the sunshine, and there's more fine settled weather to come for most of us as we go through the end of the week. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello again. I'm Jules Buckley. There's some queues on the eastbound M62. Now, there was a bump earlier just after Haywood at 19 towards Rochdale. That's now cleared. Still seeing some residual queues, though. Delays building on the southbound M6 at the moment. Middlewich at 18 down to Sandbach and Crewe at 17. There's a lane closure in place as a vehicle undergoes a tyre change. A broken down lorry northbound M1 causing queues. Lane 1 of 3 is combed off. It's at the turn for Alfreton Junction 28 in Mansfield. It's in the roadworks, adding to delays. And the clockwise M25 also has a vehicle undergoing a tyre change from Junction 7 towards Reigate to Junction 8. A 4-lane stretch there. Lane 1, the inside lane's currently coned off. Looking at the live cameras, causing some congestion on the approaches. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Greater Manchester Police did not take part in Pride events this year, with officers being ordered not to wear rainbows on their uniforms. Now, historically, officers from the force have played an active role in the parades, but now they say they want to focus on professional standards. It is some common sense policing at last. Well, to delve further into this story, I'm proud to say I'm joined by the founder of Fair Cop, Harry Miller. Harry, welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure. Now, before we get on to the decision about Manchester Police, can you outline to us here at GB News why you think the Pride movement has no place in policing?
Well, there's a number of reasons, Martin. First and foremost, Pride itself says that it's political. It's based in the Stonewall riot. Stonewall was a riot. Pride is political. And anything that touts itself as being a political movement, the police should stay very far away, because the police are not allowed to pick sides. They're not allowed to show support to anything that has a political element to it. So that's the number one reason that I don't want them marching in there. The other thing, of course, is the police pick and choose which groups they are prepared to march with and which groups they're not. I'd have a little more sympathy with the police were they to choose to march alongside a load of pasty fat white men with their builders' bumps and their beer bellies hanging out, waving their Union Jacks and singing Sweet Caroline. But they won't do that because it would give the impression that they were supporting a far-right movement. Well, equally, they shouldn't be marching along with people waving rainbow flags and intersectional flags and all the rest of it. Why? Because it suggests support for a political movement. Pride is political. The police have no place in Pride whatsoever. It's as simple as that.
So, Harry, to the Manchester decision, we're seeing pictures on our screen here of a number of senior police officers waving proudly their pride and their progress flags. There we go. That's the trans flag. A lot of people, Harry, would say that this makes the police hard to take seriously. How are we meant to be fearful? And I think maybe that's a good thing, to be slightly afraid of the coppers if they're waving a trans progress flag in your boat race. Harry Miller, have Manchester made the right decision? And as the founder of Fair Cop, I know you've been campaigning on this for a number of years. Do you think this common sense might catch on?
Yeah, it's definitely catching on. And the reason it's catching on is because Fair Cop has said that it will sue any force that marches in Pride. Stephen Watson, the Chief Constable of Manchester, is a very sensible chap. If you remember when the BLM taking the knee thing was all going on, he was asked whether his officers would take the knee. And he said he would take the knee to the Queen, to God and to Mrs. Watson. But other than that, officers have no place taking the knee to anybody. So he is an eminently sensible Chief Constable. If only more Chief Constables were like that. But whilst Chief Constables insist on marching in Pride, then Fair Cop will continue to say, we will look at taking you through the High Court because what you are doing is unconstitutional. It is a breach of the Code of Ethics. It demonstrates that you have fear of some groups and favour towards other groups, and we're simply not having it. So next up on our hit list is the Chief Constable of Northumbria, Vanessa Jardine, who last month marched not only with trans flags and pride flags and all the rest of it, but she marched alongside a bunch of people who were singing Free, Free Palestine, Intifada, Don't Deny It, Stonewall was a beep, beep riot. Now, I don't know about you, Martin, but I don't want my Chief Constable marching alongside anybody who's doing that, because yet again, it is political, it's divisive, and potentially it's encouraging violence. Do we really want that, Martin? I think not. And therefore, the safest place for police officers to be is right away from these pride marches, because otherwise we're going to be there and we're going to take you to the High Court. It's as simple as that.
Harry Miller, I think you've hit the nail on the head. The problem is once you take any side, then it opens the door for the politicisation of the police force. As you say, there's often a great crossover of the LGBTQ movement and the pro-Palestine movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, but of course the patriotic movement, that's a side that they would never take, and as a consequence, the police are caught in the crossfires. We also see different types of policing, perhaps at the Notting Hill Carnival versus what we saw at some of those working class protests across those towns with the most asylum seekers recently. Harry Miller, fantastic work. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. Any legal cases coming up, make sure to keep us up to date. We'd love to get you back on again. That's Harry Miller, the founder of Fair Cop, on the return of common sense to policing on the matter of pride. Now, as we all know by now, unless you've been living on Mars, Oasis are reuniting. Crack open the champagne supernova. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Recently, the cartoons that inspired the Bond films have been gifted to the Oscars archive. I'm joined now by John's son, Sean McCluskey. Very good to see you. Welcome to GB News.
Thanks for having me.
Do you have any memory of your dad doing these strip cartoons?
Well, many memories, yeah. We grew up with my father working at a pace. He had to turn in one strip every day, apart from Sundays. So he was always working at the house, and always taking reference material. He had models dropping in to shoot them with his camera. You go out in the garden and there'd be a guy with a machine gun and he'd be taking photos of him, things like that. Nice memories.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
What would you say about the way he characterised James Bond?
Fleming was very wary that his highbrow art was going to be somehow diminished by turning it into a strip cartoon in a newspaper. But he met with Fleming, and Fleming had had a drawing made of what he wanted Bond to look like, and it was very old-fashioned, very sort of military. And my father kind of, you know, jostled a little bit and came through with a much younger, much more lithe character. And through the first few strips, he moved Bond into a contemporary man, very much part of the 60s, and styled him in that way. And I think there's a lot of rumour that Sean Connery got the gig because he looked a lot like the drawings, because it's hard to believe now, but the strip was billboard advertised across the country.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Today is gonna be the day that they're gonna come back for you. Sorry, they keep telling me to sing for you. I know you're sick of it by now, but the point is this. You must know that they are back. The Oasis brothers, the Gallaghers, are back. After a lot of speculation, they are officially reuniting a long 15 years after they split. And they will play now some 14 UK shows next summer. Now, he's back. James McMahon, who hosts his own podcast and used to be the editor of Kerrang magazine and works on the NME Bigwig, joins me now. Jim, we were just getting warmed up in the last hour. I had to get you back in. You spoke beautifully, I felt, very movingly, of how this is more than music. It's a working class coming together moment. A quick blast on that, and then you're about to tell us a story, weren't you?
Yeah, well, I was just... Yeah, well, sorry for that. I imagine I caused your producers a bit of a headache. You know, I'm from South Yorkshire. I'm from Doncaster. Like, when I was growing up, I was into music. I got into it at an early stage. But I remember hearing Oasis, and I remember hearing Live Forever. My town, not a lot going on. I mean, obviously, you know, Doncaster is the greatest football team the world has ever seen. But apart from that, not a lot going on. Failing industries, a lot of depression in the town. And I remember hearing Live Forever, and I remember thinking, these people understand me, and I want my life to feel like this record sounds. And I've kind of always felt like that. And what I was going to tell you was that I've been in hospital for, until a week ago, the last 47 days. I'm going through some treatment, some cancer treatment. And I got a whisper, as music journalists do, that this was probably going to happen. And when I'm lying there in the bed and I'm thinking all sorts of things, I'm thinking how long my life is going to be now. I was thinking about, I want to see Oasis again. I want to feel like I did when I was a kid. And I genuinely cannot think of another band that would make me feel like that. And I know that I used to work, you know, before I was a music journalist, you know, working class kid from up north. I worked in factories. I worked night shifts. I've met so many people in my life that have had Oasis tattoos or Oasis lyrics etched into their skin for life. I can't think of another band that command that kind of commitment and devotion from, and I say this with all the infection in the world, common people. So, I don't know. Today feels like a very momentous day, and I feel like I just wish it was next summer already, to be honest.
Well, Jim, that's very, very moving. So I had no idea. I hope you're getting better there, mate. You know,
I'm going in the right direction. Here I am talking to you. You know, a week ago I was in hospital, so I'm taking that as a positive sign.
And I think, you know, Jim, you've hit the nail on the head about a lot of people from those forgotten, trampled down, rainy, dismal working class areas. And I count myself in that. You know, I grew up in a coal belt, and a lot of us had to move out of our areas to find any hope. And Oasis were that embodiment. They were our generation's Beatles. The working class kids made good, the embodiment that you couldn't make it if you had talent, if you had swagger, if you never took no for an answer. And that is why I think so many of us, Jim, grew up with this band, and we shared their aspirations. Some of us made it, a lot of us didn't. But the point is, they gave you that belief to fight on, and now they're back. A lot of people have been through a lot of life changes. They've been through marriages, they've been through divorces, they've grown up, they've had kids. But Jim, you're absolutely right. We can all just get back together and, not be sad old farts reliving our youth, but actually to get onto a spiritual plane where we can just express ourselves again and just, as you say, live forever in that moment.
I mean, you are forever. I'm going to call you Gandhi forever now, Martin. I think that, it's not going to be old dudes. It's going to be kids. If you see that crowd at Leeds and Reading Festival this weekend, that's kids. Because they look at Liam and they go, our lives, we've been told that everything about our lives is crap. We've been told that we can't do this, we can't say that, we can't be this. We've been told, the young people have had fear instilled in them. And then they see Liam on stage looking like the Dogs. And they go, I want a bit of that. And that's the same as what I wanted when I was 15. And I think that I'm so excited that this generation is going to get to see this band and feel like I did when I was 15. There's an Oasis song called Do You Want to Be a Spaceman? And it's basically it's sung by Noel. It's an early B-side. And it's basically about Noel, the protagonist, who frames himself as in his town, he meets someone 10 years on that he used to knock about with, and he goes, remember you wanted to be a spaceman? And now you're married, you've got how many kids, your life's banal. And when I hear that song, which I was listening to several times this morning, my eyes well up, and I think, I want to feel like that forever. And I want kids to feel like that, because I think that will make this country better. I feel that will make the culture of this country better. If we can make kids dream again and not so frightened of what they say and how they dress and what they do. And we need the 90s back, man. And it's not the 90s. So let's get Oasis to drag some of that spirit into the present day.
James, I'm quiet here because you're getting me all choked up, mate. Look, a lot of people listen to this, Jim, are going to love what you're saying. How can they hear more of what you got to offer? How do they get to your podcast?
Oh, listen, I've got a podcast called the James McMahon Music Podcast. It's been dormant while I've been in hospital for the last 2 months, but I'm just about to put a load of new episodes up, and looking to be back. So come and check me out.
James McMahon, absolute pleasure to speak to you. We've got to do this more often, and hopefully we'll go and see Oasis together, mate. We'll try and get tickets at the same gig. Thank you very, very much. It's glad to see you well and back on your feet. Good lad, top lad. Thank you very much. Now it's a new way to get in touch, but don't worry about that, because breaking news in the last few moments, the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that only 100 spaces are left in male prisons in England and Wales. An astonishing admission. Stay with us for more on that. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now it's your weather with Alex Burkill.
Warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. A bit of rain to come through the next couple of days and a little bit of cloud at times too, but towards the southeast it's actually looking largely fine, and here it's going to be pretty hot because we are ahead of this frontal system that's lying across us, and it's this front that's brought a fair amount of rain and will continue to do so through this evening and overnight across parts of northern England, into the West Midlands, across Wales, maybe southwest England seeing a bit of rain too. Towards the northwest there'll be some showery rain around, and some of this could be a little bit on the heavy side across parts of Scotland, but in the southeast here it's staying largely dry. We have some warm air, and so temperatures here not dropping a huge amount despite the fact that there will be some clear skies. So a pretty fine start for much of the Midlands, parts of East Anglia and southern southeastern England on Wednesday morning. Across the southwest, watch out for some mist and fog patches and a bit of rain around too. Also some rain for parts of Wales and northwest England first thing, and some further showery rain feeding into western parts of Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland as well. Further east across both of Scotland and Northern Ireland it's looking drier, although there could be some showery bursts around. More showery rain then feeding its way across parts of Northern Ireland and western Scotland as we go through the day, and we still have a front lingering across some parts of northern England, pushing into the Midlands perhaps, albeit this front doesn't look like it will bring much widespread rain. It just could bring some heavy outbreaks for some of us. Towards the south-southeast of the UK it's looking largely dry, some bright sunny spells, and with that temperatures higher than today, likely to get into the high 20s, highs around 28 or 29 Celsius perhaps. Some showery rain then continuing across particularly Scotland as we go through the end of the day on Wednesday, but a lot of that then does clear through as we go overnight. And then there's plenty of dry weather to come as we go through the end of the week, but do watch out for some showers, particularly towards the north and west on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
I'm Jules Buckley. Good afternoon. The eastbound side of the M8, so away from Glasgow, junction 13 at Provan, just away from the M80 through towards Cumbernauld Road. At junction 12, there's been a collision there, so queues forming, a lane closure in place. Still queuing eastbound for the M62, though all lanes are back open away from Haywood at junction 19 to Rochdale at 20. That follows an earlier accident. A vehicle undergoing a tyre change, still causing some queues on the southbound M6 this afternoon. Currently, there's a lane closed. It's on the stretch from Middlewich and Holmes Chapel at junction 18, heading south to Sandbach and Crewe at 17, and the northbound side of the M1 at the turn for Alfreton and Mansfield at junction 28. In the roadworks, there's queued, lane 1's combed off. There's a broken down lorry there at the moment too. And for now, that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you could win an incredible £30,000 in cash. It's extra cash that could really make a difference to your coming year. You could find yourself on that holiday you've always wanted to take, buy that treat that always seemed out of reach, or just send some of those day-to-day financial stresses packing. Time is ticking. Get your entry in now. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Hey, very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, does misery await the nation? Sir Keir Starmer braces the public for hard times ahead as he lays the foundations for a brutal budget. He says he'll clean up the country like he cleaned up the riots, but are you convinced? And we've got some breaking news. There are only 100 spaces left in male prisons across England and Wales. 100 spaces, the closest the system has come to running out of spaces. Where will they put all those Notting Hill rioters? And walking back into fashion, well, the world's senior darts tour announces that walk-on girls will make a return to televised darts for the first time in 6 years after they were banned due to mealy-mouthed feminist campaigners got them out of a job. And another exclusive from GB News. Paul Durrance, the 78-year-old Blackpool granddad, is now 24 days into his hunger strike over broken Britain. Today, Paul will exclusively tell GB News how he has endured 2 sickening, unprovoked attacks in recent days by, guess who? Pro-Palestine protesters. I'll speak to the intrepid pensioner coming up soon. Well, the show, always a pleasure to have your company. So, as we just heard there, breaking news, only 100 spaces left in our prison system, for men, that is, in England and Wales. And that gives the government something of a quandary. We've seen how many arrests, over 349 arrests at the Notting Hill Carnival. Where will these people go to jail? And we know that early release is coming on September the 10th. Some 1,500 set to be released, and then another 2,000 in October. 5,500 actually in total are being let out of jail early. Earlier on today, a story came out that you'll be able to say sorry and avoid going to jail for some serious offences, including sexual offences. The prison system is busting at its gills. What on earth are we going to do about it? Get in touch, GBNews.com/your say. Now it's your headlines, and it's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much. And let's start with that breaking news that the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that only 100 spaces are left in male prisons in England and Wales. It comes as the number of people sent to prison has reached record levels. In July, the government set out legislation to reduce the amount of time inmates must spend in jail before they're automatically released, from 50% of their sentence to 40%, in a bid to manage overcrowding. In other news, the Prime Minister has warned the October budget will be painful, but he says the country will have to accept short-term pain for long-term good. During his speech in Downing Street this morning, Sir Keir Starmer warned things will get worse before they get better. And he said next week's return to Parliament will not be business as usual. He also addressed the recent riots, saying they showed the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure. The Prime Minister also reiterated economic growth is the government's top priority.
I promised that we would get a grip on the problems that we face and that we would be judged by our actions, not by our words. I said before the election, and I say it again really clearly today, growth, and frankly by that I do mean wealth creation, is the #1 priority of this Labour government.
This comes as the Prime Minister faces pressure over accusations of cronyism as Conservatives demand an investigation into recent civil service appointments. Speaking earlier on GB News, Shadow Science and Technology Secretary Andrew Griffith suggested it was hypocritical for Labour to talk about trust in politics.
Particularly, he promised to introduce new levels of transparency and integrity, and yet what we've seen week by week over the last few weeks over the summer is revelations about Labour appointments to the civil service, the independent civil service. These aren't just the normal special advisors that all governments make political appointments to. These are some of the top roles in the independent civil service that Labour's been giving to donors and its political supporters. So it's pretty rich to talk about trust in politics at the same time as that.
Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner says it was horrific to see the damage done to the Dagenham tower block that caught fire yesterday. Everyone was accounted for and no injuries reported after a major incident was declared following the fire in East London. Over 100 people were evacuated from the building, with 2 people taken to hospital. The London Fire Commissioner Andy Rowe says firefighters tackling the blaze faced the most dangerous conditions you can imagine after what he says was a very significant building failure. Angela Rayner says the LFB has launched a full investigation.
mean, that's horrific to hear that, and I know that the London Fire Brigade have already started an investigation, and I don't want to preempt that investigation, but we've got to make sure that people have fire escape routes. It's an obligation, it's a legal obligation. I'll be meeting the Health and Safety Executive and the Building Safety Regulators tomorrow to ensure that everybody's aware of their obligations, their legal requirements, and to ensure that people do have that safety route, and to make sure that those alarms and those systems that have been put in place are there to make sure that people are safely out of buildings and that they're aware of the fire if one happens and what happens in those circumstances.
In other news, a man has been charged with murder after officers stopped him at Notting Hill Carnival. Detectives had previously issued an appeal to locate Kamar Williams, who was wanted in connection with the fatal stabbing of 53-year-old Derek Thomas in Stoke Newington. He will appear in court tomorrow. That's as 3 men have been arrested over the stabbing of a 32-year-old mother at Notting Hill Carnival, which left her in a critical condition. The woman was attending the family day on Sunday with her young child when she was attacked. The Metropolitan Police says it appears she became caught up in the middle of an altercation between 2 groups of men, but it's unclear if they were known to her. In total, 349 arrests were made over the Carnival weekend for a range of offences, including violence, sexual assaults and 60 attacks on police officers. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's congratulated the hostage who was held by the Hamas terror group since October 7th following his release. He says the entire people of Israel were moved by his being freed. Israel's military rescued 52-year-old Qaid Farhan al-Qadi, who's in a stable condition and is being transferred for medical checks at a hospital following a complex operation in southern Gaza. The hostage's family's forum said in a statement his return home is nothing short of miraculous. It said he endured 326 days in captivity. And after lots of speculation, the British pop band Oasis are officially reuniting nearly 15 years after they split. Liam and Noel Gallagher are getting back together for Oasis's long-awaited reunion with a worldwide tour next year. Oasis, who released their chart-topping album Definitely Maybe around 3 decades ago, announced the series of dates, kicking off their tour in Cardiff. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, the Prime Minister has warned us all that the October budget is going to be rather painful. Full of optimism, as always, Sir Keir Starmer also said that things are worse than they ever imagined because of the economic black hole left by the Conservative government. But don't worry, apparently the pain will be in the short term and worth it in the long run. I know we should all be very, very grateful. Now, to discuss this, I'm joined in the studio by our political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, the speech earlier on today in the Rose Garden at Downing Street was sombre, it was sober, and I think it was rather doom-laden, painful. Big asks, short-term pain, long-term gain. We're being buttered up for painful tax rises, aren't we?
I suspect we are, and it was incredibly gloomy, wasn't it, for a Prime Minister that won a massive majority less than 2 months ago. And I think really, you know, Labour won a huge majority last in '97, but the contrast could not be greater. There is none of that feeling of optimism. There's none of that excitement. I mean, we saw it in the election campaign too. It's not so much that Labour won this. They won it largely because the Conservatives, people were very, very fed up with. But now we are hearing... Now, we knew it was going to be difficult. They did say so, but they didn't want to dwell on it, neither the Tories or Labour, before the election. But now we're hearing that things are much, much worse than they knew, and there is pain coming. And I think what it's doing is laying the groundwork for really difficult decisions that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is going to take in the budget and almost certainly tax rises. Now, they're not going to raise national insurance, they're not going to raise VAT except on school fees, they're not going to raise income tax, but there's plenty of taxes that they can raise. And, you know, they said they had no plans to raise tax on working people. But no plans doesn't mean it's not going to happen. And it's very difficult to see, given the state of public services, given the lack of money, how they're going to fix things without large amounts of money and where they're going to get them from. So, yeah, very gloomy. Nothing to look forward to in the short term, or certainly doesn't sound like it.
Catherine, another problem which the government has inherited is cladding, the cladding scandal. So we saw a fire in Dagenham in East London yesterday. Mercifully, nobody killed in that, but 100 people were evacuated. And this is now a problem in the in-tray of the new housing minister, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, 7 years on from Grenfell. We found out from one of our staff at GB News that there are still 300,000 people still at risk of this cladding scandal, but they can't blame the Conservatives anymore. Do you think this is something that the new housing minister, Angela Rayner, and the Labour Party will make a priority, considering, though, they're absolutely broke?
Well, we will see, won't we? But it almost beggars belief, doesn't it, that 7 years on from Grenfell, where over 70 people died, that this cladding is still on buildings now. Michael Gove, the former housing secretary, did make various attempts. There were various battles fought. But, you know, housing is big business. These property companies, these developers, the buck is always passed to somebody else. We know that the cladding on Grenfell was only to be used on buildings of a certain height. We now know that it was put on many, many other buildings that it shouldn't have been on. And yet it's still there. Nobody has been prosecuted. Everybody blames somebody else. And we see it again and again, don't we? Whether it's the infected blood, the post office, Hillsborough, all of these scandals where ordinary people are failed massively by the state, and governments do not get these things sorted.
And returning briefly, if we could, to the Sir Keir Starmer speech earlier on, I was struck by the fact he didn't seem in a placatory mood, talking about the riots, the social unrest we saw across the UK. There's been no move towards a more expansive, reconciliatory conversation from some of those working-class communities that were impacted. The 7 most deprived areas in Britain, the 7 highest areas for asylum seekers where those riots broke out, rather than there being a conversation about how can we understand the backstory. Instead, it was talking about a fuel of populism that drove this, talking about a deeply unhealthy society. We learned a few moments ago there are only 100 places left in the male prison system. There seems to be no appetite for keeping these kind of people out of jail.
Well, I asked the Prime Minister's spokesman at the lobby briefing about this, what work specifically the government were doing to address. Obviously, the violence has to be dealt with. That's indefensible. But the dissatisfaction, the sense of people who feel that nobody cares about them, that they have no opportunities, that they have no prospects, that no one is listening. And I was told that, you know, they're going to deal with this by getting growth, spreading opportunity, etc., etc. It's all very easy to say. But of course, you know, it was a large driver of the Brexit vote. People who felt that things were not working for them. It was a large driver of Boris Johnson getting that big majority, promising to level up. But there's so many parts of the country that people just feel totally forgotten and that nobody cares.
Absolutely right. Catherine Forster, excellent as ever. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Let's return now to that breaking news that we just learned, that the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that only a mere 100 spaces are left in male prisons in England and Wales. An astonishing revelation. And here to tell us more is GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome back to the show. We've been talking all of the show until this point about the huge number of arrests at the Notting Hill Carnival, 349. And a story earlier on today as well about people can simply say sorry to avoid jail. Maybe they knew that this news was coming. An astonishing admission, Mark. Only 100 spaces left for men in our creaking prison system.
Well, certainly with regard to the community resolution, that's quite separate really to those that they're expecting to send into the prison population. But clearly they are also taking drastic measures with regard to trying to reduce that prison population as well. You remember that just last week we got the news that the police service across much of the north of England was going to start this emergency measure of holding on to those arrested, not sending them to the courts, to try to relieve the number of people within the prison estate. Well, clearly it's got way beyond that now with just 100 spaces. That is not in the slightest workable, because it can just take not even a busy weekend, but just a busy weekday night in any city for 100 extra prison spaces to be taken up if these people then are remanded in custody. So we are really now at the limit. There is no more capacity, and as such the government needs to come up with very urgent and drastic actions. Now, in the space of a month or so, we were expecting this new 40% policy to come into place. That is, that if you serve just 40% of your sentence in custody, then you're entitled, providing you're not a serious violent or sexual offender, to be released on probation, basically. At the moment it's 50% of your sentence, and then you get to serve the remainder of your sentence back in the community, on the proviso, of course, that if you reoffend, you're taken back into prison to serve the remainder of your sentence back in custody. But the government has now reached the decision and made the decision that that should be reduced to 40, which will free up thousands of additional prison places that are badly needed. But of course, it's very controversial, because the net result of that is you are sending thousands of convicted criminals, some, despite what they say, who may well pose a danger to the public, back onto the streets. And at the very least, even if they don't pose a direct danger to members of the public, then many of those people going back onto the streets will be what they call recidivists. They will be repeat offenders, because that is the pattern. A very significant, in fact, the majority of people who are released from prison within a year or two go on to reoffend and probably end up back in the prison system as well. So a significant proportion of those they're releasing will go back into the community and reoffend. It's highly controversial, but it's what the government sees as probably the only solution to a prison crisis which is so overlogged that it will just grind the whole of the criminal justice system to a halt.
And Mark White, when you look at 100 spaces left, I mean, there are over 200 people who've received a custodial sentence in wake of those protests and riots we saw after Southport. And look at the arrest tally after Notting Hill, Mark White. 61 police officers assaulted, 8 stabbings, 3 of those nearly fatal. 49 weapons seized, including 2 firearms, Mark White. 349 arrests. At this rate, Mark, the prisons will be full by tomorrow night if we're not careful.
Yeah, I mean, that 100 mark is just insignificant. It doesn't make any odds. The fact is, if you go beyond about a couple of thousand from capacity, you're in serious trouble, because, as we say, it only takes a busy weekend somewhere for there to be a lot of arrests, such as at the Notting Hill Carnival, and for many of those people to be remanded in custody until their hearing, to really just stoke it up to complete capacity. So the fact that we're 100 short makes no odds. We have reached capacity. There is no more room in the prison estate. And all the while, more and more people are being arrested, because that's the daily process of law and order in this country. Right across the country, minute by minute, police are making arrests. They go in to the police prison or the police cell system to begin with until a court appearance, and then depending on the serious nature of the indictable offence that they're accused of, they will go into the remand system. Hundreds every day enter the remand system. So we are in a deep crisis now. The government, as I say, has announced this 40% system to come into process in about a month's time. I think they're going to have to bring that forward and just get that working immediately, because without it, the criminal justice system grinds to a halt. But I say that, it's easier said than done, because you can't just turf out thousands of prisoners onto the street, Martin. You need the backup wraparound services that any prisoner being released requires. The probation hostel that they may go into in the first instance, the probation officers who are tasked with keeping an eye on these individuals to show that they're on the straight and narrow, they're not back and reoffending. It's a mess.
And Mark, we learned last week that they were going to start using prison cells to hold actual prisoners. So police becoming prison wardens. They're not trained to do that, and the actual prisons themselves aren't equipped for long-term stays. And I want to ask you this, Mark, as well as releasing people early, do you think we might see a return to a system of downgrading offenders so we don't jail them in the first place? So we talk about today there's a clampdown on shoplifting. Well, no, shoplifting is de facto legalised now. They can talk tough all they like. What other crimes may be downgraded to avoid a custodial sentence? And what message will that send out, Mark White, to those offending? If criminals know they won't get banged up, where's the incentive to not offend?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable that that will happen, Martin, and that would signal a schizophrenic approach to the criminal justice system, because you'll have the government and those in charge of law and order saying, on the one hand, that we're going to get tough, we're getting tough on the rioters, we're getting tough on the shoplifters, we're getting tough on the sexual offenders, all manner of crimes they're getting tough on. But on the other hand, those in the judiciary, in the criminal justice system, are being told that there is logjam within that system, within the prison service, and that actually, if they can avoid sending someone down the road of a prison sentence and go for a community option instead, or a fine, that should be the road to go. And you're right, it sends out a very worrying message that although the government might say on one hand we're being tough, in practice they're being very weak.
Mark White, excellent analysis as ever. I'm joined now by Gaynor Bell, a knife crime campaigner after her son Stefan was stabbed to death more than 20 years ago. Gaynor, welcome to the show. You may have overheard some of that conversation there. 100 spaces left now before we reach capacity in British prisons in England and Wales alone. And a story out today, which I know will concern you, Gaynor. More than 147,000 people accused of offences, including possession of weapons and violence, will simply say sorry and be given community resolution orders rather than going to jail. Again, what's your take on that?
I'm just devastated and appalled. I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. The Colin Needle who killed my son has just been on a parole after 20 years because he committed another offence. I don't know what it is. I'm presuming it's violence. But basically, he's committed so many crimes and he's going back on the streets. He had a parole hearing, they've actually let him out. But this is just going on and on. I've worked with young people and, you know, they used to get sentenced if they were carrying a knife. It's got to somehow stop. All this has got to stop. It's going on and on and on until somebody actually puts a stop to it. You know, and to say, the saying that if you say sorry, you can get off of this. How ridiculous. We're going to see more and more knife crime as it goes on. We really are. You know, I think I always say and drum it in, it's got to start as education. But, you know, they've known the prisons are full for many years. And I'm not a racist in any way. But, you know, there's a lot of foreigners in our prisoners that are taking room up. They should be sending them back to their own countries to have the sentences there. That would free up the prisons. You know, it's just ridiculous saying our prisons are full and we haven't got room for them. You know, I just find it ridiculous.
It's astonishing, Gaynor. Every time I talk to you, there seems to be a fresh injustice poured upon you. Thank you very, very much for your work. We have a brief hit today, but let's please talk again soon. Gaynor, thank you very, very much for joining us. Now, Oasis are making a return. More on that next. But first, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Fatima's UK campaign, Children and Young People Matter. Because I actually run a campaign, and my ministry today is about looking after children in the care system and improving their life outcomes. You know, for me, I had a difficult start to my childhood, and I will never forget it. I mean, I always say I may have left the care system, but the care system hasn't left me. And I instantly understand the importance of giving our young children and young people the opportunity to also, you know, have good life outcomes. So Fatima's UK campaign is all about that. And it's a summit next year. Eamon, I hope you're going to come.
No, I know we've talked about this before, and certainly, I mean, I believe in what you're doing. I think it's marvellous what you're doing, and that's why, you know, when you think about children, and children are so close to you, and you look at that horror that happened in Southport yesterday, I mean, things like that
exactly.
Will really hit home hard.
Well, children are the innocent ones, aren't they, Eamon? And this is what we look at when you think they're the future. We've got to start to put them back at the top. And it's a travesty when we see things like that, you know, Omar, that happen. You know, children are the ones that are impacted. And, you know, it's, for me, you know, really important to be able to do the best we can and looking after their future. And so hopefully, you know, I'm going to the Pyrenees in September, Eamon. That's my next challenge, the Bay of Biscay from France to Spain and back. And hopefully people can go online, fatimascampaign.com, and give generously to help make a difference to these young people's lives. Because, as I say, children are the future.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. It's almost 5:29. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, after much speculation, Oasis are officially reuniting nearly 15 years after the Gallagher brothers split. Let's find out more now from GB News' North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper.
Well, it's finally time for fans of Oasis to stop crying their hearts out, because after 15 years, they've been given everything they ever dreamed of. That's right, Liam and Noel Gallagher have announced this morning that they will be reuniting for a tour next summer. 14 dates, Manchester, London, Dublin, Edinburgh and Cardiff, so there is a lot of excitement. Now, we're here outside the Boardwalk Club in Manchester, where in 1991 a very young Oasis performed their first ever gig, not to the audiences of thousands that we were used to seeing them perform in front of, but instead in front of dozens of people. And tickets would have cost around £3, which according to the Bank of England these days is around £6.68. So So I imagine people this time, if they're going to go for tickets on Saturday, will be paying significantly more than that. However, that is not the concern of a lot of people here in Manchester, and I'm sure nationwide, if not globally, the real concern is going to be whether people can actually get a hold of tickets altogether. They're going to be like gold dust. Now, earlier on we spoke to people here in Manchester to ask if they're going to be going for tickets and how nervous they are about their ability to obtain them.
Absolutely brilliant. Best news I've heard in, well, 15 years.
I'm buzzing, me. I'm a massive Oasis fan. I've seen Liam Gallagher a few times, but together, man, I'll be sick, yeah.
My boyfriend is very, very happy. He said it was...
You're not that bothered?
I don't care that much.
It'd be great if you get tickets.
Big fans?
I'd say my brother definitely more so, but I'd try and get tickets to go.
Thinking they might need some money. Do you reckon that's what it's for?
No, you know, that's what my first thought was.
Well, there we are. That is the question on everybody's lips. Will there be more dates added? There's 14 dates as it stands, but the gambler in me thinks that perhaps they will end up adding more, especially if that site crashes on Saturday, as people go to try and get tickets of, let's be honest, the gig of the century. Oasis are back together and people are very, very excited. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if today there will be a lot of champagne supernovas all over the UK.
A final pun sneaking in there. Manchester, of course, it's rained the Boardwalk. I've had some tasty nights out down that place in the past. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. I'll be joined again by the hunger striker, pensioner Paul Durand, who will tell us about his bad experiences with some pro-Palestine protesters in Blackpool. That's coming soon, but first is your headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much. And we start this bulletin with some breaking news that 2 men have been charged with murder and attempted murder over a house fire in Bradford. West Yorkshire Police says 44-year-old Mohammed Shabir and 25-year-old Callum Sunderland have both been charged with 4 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder over that fire that killed a mother and her 3 children. 29-year-old Bryony Gowith and her 3 children, 5-year-old Oscar and 22-month-old Aubrey died after their home was reportedly deliberately set alight last Wednesday. In other news, the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that only 100 spaces are left in male prisons in England and Wales. It comes as the number of people sent to prison has reached record levels. In July, the government set out legislation to reduce the amount of time inmates must spend in jail before they're automatically released, from 50% of their sentence to 40%, in a bid to manage overcrowding. The Prime Minister has warned the October budget will be painful, but he says the country will have to accept short-term pain for long-term good. During his speech in Downing Street this morning, Sir Keir Starmer warned things will get worse before they get better. And he said next week's return to Parliament will not be business as usual. He also addressed the recent riots, saying they showed the cracks in our society after 14 years of populism and failure. The Prime Minister also reiterated economic growth is the government's top priority. And Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner said it was horrific to see the damage done to the Dagenham tower block that caught fire yesterday. Everyone was accounted for and no injuries reported after a major incident was declared following that fire in East London. Over 100 people were evacuated from the building, with 2 people taken to hospital. The London Fire Commissioner Andy Rowe says firefighters tackling the blaze faced the most dangerous conditions you can imagine, and he said very significant building failures were found. Angela Rayner says the LFB has launched a full investigation. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report. Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, hundreds of you have been getting in touch with your says throughout the show, and I've got one here from Eileen, a superb point. She says this about Sir Keir Starmer's speech earlier on in the Rose Garden at Downing Street: hard times ahead, unless, of course, you belong to a public sector union, in which case you'll be laughing all the way to the bank, while the rest of us struggle to pay for your inflation-busting pay rises. Eileen, superb point. That's my favourite part of the show. I'm joined by Michelle Dewberry, the queen of prime-time political debate. Michelle Dubes, 6 or 7. What's on your show?
Well, of course, there's only one real main story in town, and that is Keir Starmer's speech this morning. So, of course, I want to unpick this. I've got Matt Goodwin keeping me company. He's not happy at all, by the way, that no focus whatsoever has gone on many people's primary concerns, which is about the uncontrolled immigration in their area. So I want to look at that. Also, as well, I caught your singing earlier on, Martin, the Oasis. It made me think to myself, you know, we need to find a karaoke bar somewhere before this massive reunion takes place.
Definitely up for that. I think you've probably got a much better voice than me, but I think you're dead right, Michelle, about that speech earlier on. A lot of people felt it was unfair to say, oh, it's all about populism. It's all about 14 years of Tory rule. No attempt to engage with the working class communities, Michelle, that suffered those protests.
Exactly, and this is the thing. When you look at the GB News inbox, you've got to give it... I want to give Christopher Hope a bit of a medal, because God loves a trier. And Christopher Hope, he was in the audience, Martin, his hands up, no messing around, trying to pitch a question, not for himself, but, of course, on behalf of every single GB News viewer out there. Did we get listened to again today? No, we did not. Will we stop trying? No, we will not. We will continue.
Well, the Labour government might avoid the difficult questions. I know that you won't. Michelle Dewberry, 6 till 7. Dubes & Co. Simply unmissable. Make sure you tune in. Now, if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll try and read out some more of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. A bit of a north-south split across the UK today. Many northern areas seeing some rain, but largely dry and fine further south. So we can see this rainfall first thing this morning across many parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. But for Northern Ireland, it will quickly clear here, so conditions improve as the day goes on. That rain just moving into Cumbria and Wales later on too. And that rain just quite heavy and persistent at times, so some fairly poor travelling conditions, especially across parts of southwestern Scotland. Ahead of it, dry and bright and increasingly warm, could see highs reaching around 25 or 26 degrees in the southeast. So moving into the evening, conditions improve for many parts of Scotland. Some late spells of sunshine around, maybe the odd shower. But for southwestern Scotland and Cumbria, that rain just persisting right throughout the evening. So again, a bit of a difficult commute home here. A few showers also for Northern Ireland, and that rain just beginning to fringe into southwestern England too as we end the day. But for the rest of England, it's a fine end with some late spells of sunshine. Into the evening, that weather front will just move a little bit further eastwards. It starts to weaken as it does so, but still some patchy rain on it as we move through the nighttime period. Either side of it, some clear skies, and for all of us, it's a fairly mild night. Towns and cities staying firmly above double figures. Into Wednesday morning, that area of cloud and patchy rain just really lingers across many central parts of the country. Behind it, another spell of rain moving in for Northern Ireland and Scotland. So after a little bit of a drier spell, turns wet, unfortunately, again here. But down towards the southeastern parts of England, remaining onto the dry and fine conditions, and increasingly warm. Could see highs reaching around 28 to 29 degrees.
The latest GB News travel.
And a very good afternoon. My name is Johnny Ratner. Long queues continue heading east away from Glasgow on the M8. One lane still out of action between the M80 interchange and the Cumbernauld Road exit of the A80 following an accident. In Northumberland, west of Hexham, after a lorry caught fire, the A69 remains shut between Warden and Hayden Bridge. And in Greater Manchester on the M62, there are eastbound queues from Hayward to Rochdale Junction, 19 to 20 after an earlier collision that's long gone. Staffordshire, Christchurch Way at Stone, blocked by collision. In North London, the Camden Road is blocked northbound through Holloway at the scene of a collision. In South East London, the Baring Road is shut through Mottingham by a collision at LeMay Avenue. On the M32, if you're heading out of Bristol up to the M4, one lane shut for emergency lighting repairs. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:40. You're on the final furlong, even with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, between now and the end of the show, we'll be discussing whether walk-on girls are strutting back into fashion, because the World Senior Darts Tour has confirmed that the walk-on girls will make a stunning return to televised darts after they were banned 6 years ago by mealy-mouthed feminists who said it was sexist. Now, we had some breaking news in the last hour, and the Ministry of Justice has confirmed that there are now only a mere 100 spaces left in male prisons in England and Wales, an astonishing admission. And they've released the following statements to confirm that. The new government inherited a justice system in crisis and has been forced into taking difficult but necessary action to ensure that we can keep up locking up dangerous criminals and to protect the public. Staff across the whole criminal justice system are working incredibly hard, and the government will continue to support them before the changes come into effect onto the 10th of September. Now, that day there, the 10th of September, is highly significant because that is the date earmarked for the first set of prisoners to be early released on the new law of having to only serve 40% of their sentence. So this, it seems, a statement is going out in admission of the fact that there will be a whole chunk of people released early on September the 10th, and then a further chunk on October the 22nd. We learned from a criminal barrister last week on this show, 5,500 prisoners are set to be released early over the coming months. And we learned today there are a mere 100 spaces left. That says to me a system creaking at the gills, a system where early release is becoming something of a new norm, with only 100 spaces to go. Where will they put the people? Let's just go through some of these numbers, astonishing numbers about the arrest at the Notting Hill Carnival. We broke earlier on today on the show. 61 police officers were assaulted over the Notting Hill Carnival weekend. 8 stabbings, 3 of them almost fatal. 49 weapons were seized, including 2 firearms. 2 guns were seized at that festival. 349 arrests across that festival alone. 200 people were jailed in the wake of the protests and the riots across Britain. 200. There's only 100 left, and there's 349 arrests, including 61 officers assaulted at the Notting Hill Carnival. Where are these people going to go? Will they end up in prison? Or will they end up with a slap on the wrist? What do you think? I know what I think. And I think the system is broken. It seems to be, to many people getting in touch with this show, to be two-tiered. Straight to jail for a Facebook post. Straight to jail if you happen to be even at one of the riots, if you have the wrong opinions about immigration in the country. But it's OK to get off. We heard today there's an attempt to say sorry for violent crimes, including knife possession, including violent crimes, a community disbursement order coming through. Is that what you think should be happening with our justice system? I suspect not. Get into its usual ways. Talking of which, let's read out a few of your comments before the end of the show. We've had absolutely hundreds so far today. And on that topic of jails, Beverly says this. So let me get this straight, Martin. Murderers, rapists, violent criminals and illegal immigrants will get 3 meals per day and heating through the winters, while our British pensioners, who have paid all their working lives, will freeze and starve. How is that fair? Beverly there is, of course, talking about potential tax rises in Sir Keir Starmer's speech earlier, saying very, very hard decisions will have to be made. And a lot of people are feeling quite put out about the fact there's been a cut to the winter fuel allowance for old age pensioners, which is now means-tested. A lot of them are confused about how to do that, or perhaps even too proud to do so. And also we covered earlier on a story about a RAF base deemed uninhabitable for our servicemen, and yet these same conditions would be considered to be not fair for illegal immigrants. For example, on the Bibby Stockholm, that would have been deemed unsafe. Now, coming up, a change of pace, walk on girls, or to return to darts. Is it sexist? Send your views and post your comments by going to gbnews.com/your say. I'll be back soon. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, this isn't a royal tour, obviously, because they've stepped away from their royal duties. What do we make of how this is being handled out in Colombia with Harry and Meghan?
Good afternoon, Dawn. A pleasure to be with you. The couple have had 3 layers of security around them. The big, beefy ex-military boys, who are the bodyguards, close protection. Then there's the outer circle of uniformed police, and then mingling in the crowds, undercover police spotting any trouble. And they've been travelling around the country in a convoy of bulletproof cars with a couple of ambulances in the convoy. When you look at this tour, and as you say, it's the Do It Our Way semi-royal tour of Colombia, the Sussexes in South America. What you can say is the star of the show has definitely been Meghan, and there we see her. She's been wearing many thousands of pesos worth of outfits while she's there, smiling, as you can see, all the time. I mean, she is very much to the palace born, and this is the greatest role she's ever played, and she's playing it to the hilt. I must say that the prince, sometimes he looks a little bit doubtful, a little bit diffident, but then he warms up when he meets the children or he meets the wounded veterans who will be taking part in his Invictus Games. It's a strange thing they've done because, as you say, it's not a royal tour, it's doing it their way. I think at the end of it, they will think that they've had a great success, and I'm sure that the left-wing government of Colombia will relish the little bit of royal stardust that Meghan, among other, with her husband, have brought to the regime.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back now. A 78-year-old granddad from Blackpool is 24 days into a hunger strike protesting against illegal immigration and the state of Britain. Now, he was recently harassed by a pro-Palestine protester in the street in Blackpool. Let's take a look.
Israel! Israel! Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
Disgusting. Let's speak now to the man himself, Paul Durrant. Paul, welcome to the show. So we had you in the studio. You told us about your hunger strike for what you called a broken Britain. You've been bravely and resolutely carrying on, and now you've had this abuse. And I understand also there was another incident, Paul Durrant, where you were harangued in the street. Tell me what's going on and why you think you deserve this.
People basically are not... they don't like me flying the Israeli flag. The flag that I fly is me Israeli, me Ukrainian, and the Save the Children flag, and they don't like me doing it. No.
But Paul, you're perfectly entitled to do so, and you're putting this forward. It's an apolitical movement. You believe the country is broken. 24 days in, Paul. I've got to ask you this. A lot of people have been getting in touch with GB News since you first came in. They're concerned about your health, and you're knocking on a bit. I'm not being funny when I say that. Are you okay?
Okay at the moment, yeah, and I'm going to plod on with what I'm doing. I need to get the government to listen. They're not going to do nothing unless they listen to me. It's wrong what they're doing. All these people coming in day after day, week after week. It really is not good, Mr. Starmer. You've got to stop it. They're not even good sending them back. We cannot hold our breath. You know, it's that bad.
And Paul, aside from the fact we're seeing this idiot here giving you hassle on the street, and another one I understand was screaming in your face yesterday morning, tell us about some of the more positive feedback you've had from citizens in Blackpool about your brave hunger strike.
The people that come and contact me are okay. They're good people and they care about the country. But what is really happening is they're not getting a say. Nobody is fighting for the old people and the young children. He still hasn't done nothing. He's still made no statement about what he's going to do to help people. It's all about what he's going to do to take money off old people and the rest of the country. And we want to know what is going on, Mr. Starmer, because we honestly... We can't believe what is happening to our country. It is a disgrace what you're doing to it.
OK, Paul Durant, thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. And you stay safe out there, mate. Keep your strength up and keep in touch. And let's do all we can to promote you here on GB News. An absolute pleasure to speak to you, Paul Durant. Thank you very much. Stay safe there in Blackpool. Now, change of pace now, because Walk On Girls are set to make a return to televised darts for the first time in 6 years for October's World Seniors Match Play. But is this a welcome return to political incorrectness or a mistake? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the creator of the World Seniors Darts Tour, Jason Francis. Jason, welcome to the show. So they were the darts girls, the walk-on girls. They were given the job a few years ago. That was a victory for feminism. But I've always felt that these girls were a bullseye with darts fans. Tell us why you're bringing them back.
Martin, I mean, we're delighted that Charlotte and Daniela are coming back to the World Seniors Darts Tour. We've listened to the fans. We get accused so much of not listening to people. Since the World Seniors Tour has started, there's been lots of fan groups and forums, and they campaign for a certain player to come back. We know that. They want to see the old favourites on the Seniors Tour. But more and more of them were asking, bring back the girls, bring back the sparkle. We're in the entertainment business, Martin.
Jason, I totally agree, and I was very disappointed when they were axed the first time. Oasis are returning. The Darts Girls are returning. Jason, are we seeing a beautiful movement, a retro movement back towards common sense entertainment for the working classes? And if you don't like it, El Tuffo.
Well, isn't it great? I mean, it's great news about the boys today. One thing I can promise you is the tickets to see the World Seniors Darts Tour with Charlotte and Daniela will be a bit more reasonably priced than Liam and Noel. But yeah, we can't wait. They're coming back as ambassadors. Of course, people will talk about the walk-on element, but they're there to promote the tour. And as I say, they're part of darting family. They were part of this rise of darts on TV. They've been away for far too long, and it's great to have them back.
Now, very quickly, Jason, we've got about 30 seconds. How can people get tickets? When does the tournament start?
Well, so the first up is the World Seniors Darts Match Play at the York Barbican. That's October the 4th and 5th, and the girls will be there both days. Then we're in Sunderland on the 8th and 9th of November, and then in February it's the big one, the World Seniors Darts Championship back at the famous Circus Tavern from the 20th to the 22nd of February. So get on dartshop.tv and you can come and see the girls.
Jason Francis, absolutely magnificent. A bullseye with fans, I'm sure. Superb. Thanks for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure. Now, that's it from me. Jubes & Co. is up next. I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. And also brace yourselves for the return in the studio at 7 p.m. The return of Nigel Farage. He's back. He'll be live exclusively on GB News. I'll be back at 3. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now it's your weather with Alex Burkle. Have a cracking evening.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again. Here's your latest GB News weather update coming to you from the Met Office. A bit of rain to come through the next couple of days and a little bit of cloud at times too, but towards the southeast it's actually looking largely fine, and here it's going to be pretty hot because we are ahead of this frontal system that's lying across us, and it's this front that's brought a fair amount of rain and will continue to do so through this evening and overnight across parts of northern England, into the West Midlands, across Wales, maybe southwest England seeing a bit of rain too. Towards the northwest there'll be some showery rain around, and some of this could be a little bit on the heavy side across parts of Scotland, but in the southeast here it's staying largely dry. We have some warm air, and so temperatures here not dropping a huge amount despite the fact that there will be some clear skies. So a pretty fine start for much of the Midlands, parts of East Anglia and southern southeastern England on Wednesday morning. Across the southwest, watch out for some mist and fog patches and a bit of rain around too. Also some rain for parts of Wales and northwest England first thing, and some further showery rain feeding into western parts of Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland as well. Further east across both of Scotland and Northern